I should laugh, but I cry because your love has
And so, my fellow Americans,
you took me by
ask
surprise.
not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Took me by surprise. I didn't realize.
This evening, I came here to speak to you about Vietnam. I do not have to tell you that our people are profoundly concerned about that struggle. There are passionate convictions about the lives of people.
Okay, would you roll a 270 from the smoke, approximately 100 meters away from it now, just
Well, Nazi. Shut up a minute. No, I won't. And some people will throw Nazi, and the answer is that they were well treated by people who ostracized them, and I'm for ostracizing people who egg on other people to shoot American Marines and American soldiers. I know you don't care. You don't feel any sense about identification.
Crypto-Nazi I can think of is yourself. Failing that, I would only say that we can't have.
Now listen, you stop calling me a crypto-Nazi.
Let's stop calling names.
You in your goddamn face. You stay plastered.
Gentlemen, let's
go. Let the author of Myra Breckenridge go back to his pornography and stop making any allusions of Nazism to somebody who was infantry in the last war. You were not a Nazi.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions.
I don't accept the whole situation. You know, like I was in the desert minding my business. This confusion belongs to you. It's your confusion. I don't have any confusion.
Sock it to me.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of audio commentaries dedicated to discussing cinema that fascinates us in a way we hope fascinates you. We're your co-hosts, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Levi.
And we can finally say we made it out of Vegas. I know Vegas was a... How'd you like our kind of trip through Vegas?
I mean, it was fun, but also, in a way, it became repetitive, I think. Like what Vegas is itself.
Yeah, I mean, but always remember, what happens in Vegas stays on YouTube, or our YouTube channel at Overlapping Dialogue. Right. So... we're going to be moving out of Vegas, but we're going to still be staying in the, late 60s, early 70s, which we get lost there quite often and don't really feel like coming back.
No.
But today we're going to be looking at the very first film, not necessarily his first film, but our first film, looking at one of our very favorite directors, in Robert Altman with his 1970 follow-up to MASH, which of course got all the acclaim, all the hype, and really started to change Hollywood. This movie, far less pronounced in terms of its legacy, but I think no less interesting, is 1970s. It came out in December, I believe, of 70.
Yeah, December 5th.
Brewster McCloud. And so, Levi, why don't you run us through kind of a brief, quick synopsis to the best of your abilities of this movie, and also just a lot of the key creatives involved.
Well, Brewster McCloud is a 1970 American black comedy film directed by Robert Altman. It was written by a guy named Doran William Cannon, which I want to talk more about that later, who is also the writer of Skidoo.
Another of our favorite.
Skidoo, which is a movie we'll get to eventually on here.
We already have plans for when it is, actually.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just going to read what it says here, and then we can kind of talk more about it. It concerns a young recluse who lives in a fallout shelter of the Houston Astrodome, where he is building a pair of wings in order to fly. He is helped by his comely and enigmatic fairy godmother as he becomes a suspect in a series of murders. It's important to note, first of all, we can talk more about this later a little bit. It was the first film ever filmed in the Houston Astrodome. It had just been built around that time. But yeah, it's basically about this kid named Brewster McCloud who is very kind of weird and kind of reserved and
eccentric,
and eccentric.
But he's no more eccentric, as it turns out, than the rest of the characters in this movie.
I mean, he's one of the less weirder ones, actually. And him obsessed with building this flying machine. And he's like hiding in the Astrodome. It's the people who work there don't know that he's there.
Yeah.
So he's not supposed to be there. It's interesting. It's kind of, and it's not really at all like Phantom of the Opera or something like what Phantom of the Paradise would be. But in the sense of, there's someone hiding somewhere in this big structure, and they're going to do their big thing. But it's not at all in the same tone of that.
No.
It's not gothic. It's not, it's very American in a way, as that's a very European kind of thing.
Yeah, very true. I hadn't thought about the Phantom of the Opera.
I haven't either until just now.
Very true.
But and then there's a million other things that happened in this movie. All the reviews that we read, it talked about how the movie feels like anything can happen at any moment. And
which I think is true of a lot of Altman movies. Has that feeling
that's true. But this, I think, more than most, just because it is. Because even a lot of his other movies, even though they kind of have a lot of crazy things going on, are much more grounded in reality than this movie is, I think.
Yeah.
But other than something like Popeye, which I haven't seen, but.
That's clearly adapting this.
But that's what I was going to say, is it's adapting something that you already have an expected, expectations for what should happen in a Popeye movie.
So run through maybe some of the cast and crew here real quick. Well, again, as we said, this was in December of 70 when this came out.
Right, and MASH came out in January, I think, so he kind of got it right at the beginning of the year. So Bud Cort as Brewster McCloud. Bud Cort has had a very interesting but kind of sadly small career.
Yeah.
I don't know if small is the word. He still works and does things.
To me, Bud Cort is an actor who's forever, engrossed in amber in this particular moment in time between this and, of course, Harold and Maude.
Right.
He kind of, I feel like he really represented this particular moment of American young, maleness and youth. And so between these two movies, I think he's always going to really be remembered as a person of this moment.
Right.
He also had a small role in MASH as well, and I'd forgotten he was even in that. But yeah, I mean, he's done some things since then. This is actually our second Bud Cort film, I guess.
Yeah, because he's been in some
Life Aquatic,
and he was. I always like to bring up that diner owner in Heat, uncredited randomly. And then he was like Toy Man and
Superman
The Voice.
Series,
I mean, he's been in a lot of random things. But yeah, I feel like he never obviously had that large of a career, and it was mostly encapsulated in two movies that were largely forgotten about at the time that they were released. This even more so than Harold and Maude, and still not as famous as Harold and Maude is now. But I guess maybe that's part of why he didn't have as big of a career. I don't know. That he was the lead in two movies that.
Well, there are a lot of new movie stars being minted at this time, and they can't all be next level A-plus movie stars, I guess. So, he kind of slipped a little more through the cracks.
Sally Kellerman is Louise, who is his guardian angel or whatever it is in the movie.
And she pops up in several Altman movies as well. She was also in MASH.
Yeah. Michael Murphy is Detective Frank Schaff, which everybody talked about this, is basically doing a Steve McQueen in Bullet impression. Yeah. The weirdest thing about this to me is that he has these blue like contact lenses that make his eyes blue, which is really strange and off-putting when you have seen Michael Murphy in so many things, and that obviously he's worked with Altman a lot. He was the mayor of Gotham City in Batman Returns. That's the first thing I would have ever seen him in.
Yeah, me too.
He's also very memorable in his one scene in Magnolia.
Yeah. All he's wanting to know if Linda needs a car.
Yeah, I need to sober up.
We'll maybe talk about this at another point, actually, but Tanner 88.
Yeah.
That's his is that probably his only Altman movie where he really has a big lead performance in it?
Because the only one I'm really aware of,
because he's also in Nashville.
Okay, Mrs. Miller.
And so he pops up in a lot of Altman stuff. I know they were close personal friends.
Right.
But Tanner 88's the only one I can think of offhand that he was like the lead of. And,
I think so. Yeah. And of course he would reappear as Tanner in Rolling Thunder Review, the Bob Dylan.
Which I just want to say about this briefly. I didn't really know exactly while I was watching most of that movie of all the chicanery that was going on for a lot of it in terms of the playing with fact and fiction. And I hadn't even seen Tanner 88 yet, but I knew of what that was. Yeah. The instant he popped up and it said Senator, what is his first name? I can't remember. Tanner, whatever it was. I was like, and I heard a few chuckles in the audience I saw it with, but a lot of other people I could tell was just taking it on its face value.
Yeah.
When I saw him pop up, it kind of made me retroactively go, wait a minute, what am I watching exactly?
Jack Tanner.
That's it, yeah, Jack Tanner. That instantly I was like, wait a minute, what's Scorsese doing with this here?
Yeah.
And then I went back and seen that whole movie was playing with fact and fiction in interesting ways. But anyways,
yeah.
Michael Murphy, always a fun face to see pop up.
William Wyndham as Haskell Weeks. Of course, the biggest thing to remark upon about that character is that his name's Haskell Weeks, is a reference to Haskell Wexler, who we've talked about on this podcast before here and there. I don't really remember him in this movie, really, but it should be said, you've seen this movie twice, and I've only seen it once still, so I'm kind of a little foggier on some of the things. Shelley Duvall as Suzanne Davis. She, I think, is like one of the tour guides of the Houston Astrodome.
Now, wasn't this the very first thing she was ever in?
So.
I think she was discovered while making this movie.
Because I a lot of people associate her with different things. The first thing I would have ever seen her in is the Shelley Duvall's fairy tale theater stuff as a kid, which is still very interesting. And if you've never seen any of that, go back and
they're great.
See those, because they're
great products of their time for one thing too, because they got a lot of actors and directors who kind of collaborated in the 80s.
Right.
Our personal favorite is the Three Little Pigs.
Yeah.
Who all was in that? Billy Crystal, Jeff Goldblum.
I can't
remember
that
Fred Willard.
Fred Willard, and then that other guy.
And then the guy that was the Big Bad Wolf guy.
Yeah,
yeah. He played Kramer.
Right. He's in a
guy
lot of
playing
stuff.
Kramer on Seinfeld.
Right.
But
yeah, but anyway, and a lot of people also associate Shelley Duvall, of course, with The Shining.
Yeah, that's probably the single biggest thing she's
done.
But
and obviously, kind of first thing I think of with her is just all the work she's done with Altman, and him really championing her.
But again, I think it's really cool that this is a classic thing with Altman. He wants to just like get random people who have an authenticity to them that don't feel like actors, they feel like real people.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that she was found as a part of this and then ended up being in a great deal of his movies, many of his movies in the years that followed. And this would be a good chance to say, we're both huge fans of Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
But if you know anything about the production of The Shining, he really put her, I think, through unmitigated hell for no real reason to make that movie. And I think that it really was even more, I've heard her say this, even more shocking to her in the production of that movie is because of how gentle Altman was as a collaborator.
Yeah,
she was used to making those movies, and then all of a sudden she's working with Kubrick, and he's, ordering her around and bossing her around in such a harsh way.
Yeah, and we can talk about this later about comparing those two, I guess, but Altman made 13 films in the 1970s. Let's see, how many did he make?
Clockwork Orange.
And Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
He made 2 movies in the 1970s. Now, of course, he had made movies very quickly at
I
the
guess
end.
made like 4 movies
end
in the
those.
60s.
Right.
And then we got Spartacus, Lolita, Strangelove,
yeah,
and then 2001.
Right. So he made 2001 on one side of the 70s decade in 68, and then The Shining in 80. But yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to think like
now Barry Lyndon is a masterpiece.
No, I mean, and that's what I was going to say is overall, I still even would say that Kubrick is a better filmmaker than Robert Altman. But it's so close, it's razor thin. I don't know.
Very different filmmakers.
Yeah, but but that's what I'm saying. It's just interesting. It's like so. You were being. This is a random thing talking about Kubrick now. It's like you're being just a total frankly, just maniac.
Yeah.
Acting like the way you do, and you only made 2 movies in that decade, and then Robert Altman made 13, and I think there are so many more movies in that decade that are better than what he made in that decade.
Yeah.
And that's not and then he has made better films than the best Altman films, but not by a lot either, though.
No.
So I don't know. Like I said, I think it's good you're bringing this up because there are some scenes in The Shining with her acting that really is, oh no, this really is another level of acting, and it's great. But then you realize, oh, it's because it almost wasn't acting because it was this psychological horror that was going on set.
I don't want to I don't want to make this sound more paternalistic than it should be. But you just look at Shelley Duvall, and she just seems like this kind of great, young, innocent flower that needs to be protected. And it really, again, I'm a huge fan of Kubrick, but it really kind of pisses me off that he was a part of that abuse, basically.
And that Jack Nicholson was allowed to do whatever he wanted. And don't get me wrong, Jack Nicholson's like my second favorite actor, but I
Shelley
don't
Duvall,
know.
she is specifically in these Altman movies, and we recently just saw 3 Women for the first time, and she's terrific in that. And that's a kind of a different Shelley Duvall compared to a lot of other ones.
Yeah.
But she's really great in this as well, and adds, again, that authenticity that I think really shines through.
Yeah. Anyway. I mean, she's great, but I'm glad we actually talked about some of that, though, because that's important. Rene Abenjois as the lecturer. Now, he's been in a lot of random things. He's been in a lot of these Altman films. He was in...
he was in McCabe, Mrs. Miller.
You're right. He was in the Alex Cox film Walker.
Oh, that's right. He was, yeah.
He's been in a couple Kelly Reichardt films, because I think, if not his last film, one of his last films was First Cow, because he just died pretty recently.
I think about him a lot in Certain Women.
Yeah.
He's not in that a whole lot. He's in the Michelle Williams portion of that movie. But a really great old man role.
Oh, yeah.
Is him in that, and so he's terrific. How do we talk about this lecture? And we'll talk about this as the movie goes on. It's like these interstitial lectures that go on about birds and flying that are kind of throughout the movie, and he just kind of pops up. They feel really disconnected from the narrative.
They do, and yet they feel like they're supposed to be telling me something, and I don't know what it is. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty hilarious. Of course, the biggest thing about it is that he's slowly becoming a bird.
Yeah.
And by the end, there's kind of the final moment where it's like pretty horrifying looking the way he looks, and it's very off-putting.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I don't know, but I mean, we can talk about that later because I don't really know what to say about that other than wow, I don't know. Margaret Hamilton as
the Wicked Witch of the West.
Daphne Heap. Yeah, it's interesting that. First of all, it's really quickly to go on this whole kind of thing. It's interesting to me when you look back at actually how The Wizard of Oz, other than somebody like Judy Garland, for the most part, the actors from that film didn't really have careers.
No.
And you're like, but this is The Wizard of Oz. That's something I've always thought about that. And I'm like, but this is The Wizard of Oz. What? But then you realize actually that movie was not all that successful when it came out. It didn't have that much of a cultural footprint as it does now. But
it was one of those things that built over years,
right.
But it was not.
And I think that by this time, obviously Margaret Hamilton being in the film, and she has this moment where she wears the ruby slippers, and it makes sense then at that point where that would have been an influence. But at least in the 30s, late 30s, early 40s, like you didn't see people like Burt Lahr having a career, or Margaret Hamilton having a career.
Yeah, like you said, really, other than Judy Garland. And that was in the midst of she already was having a career.
Right, and she was, wearing blackface in movies and stuff. Yeah. So, sorry to call her out, but...
because I'm a fan of Judy Garland.
Because we recently watched Bamboozled, the Spike Lee joint, which we both really love.
Yeah.
But there was a moment towards the end of that where it's showing like almost like a
clip, a montage,
of blackface or like either blackface or like bad, racist portrayals of African Americans, and that there was a moment with her and Mickey Rooney in one of those whatever their movies were putting on blackface, and I was just staring at that and I just shook my head. I was like, yeah,
one of our faves too. James Cagney, he engaged in some of that.
No, too. Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up now because anyway, we're going all over the place.
But again, the thing with Margaret Hamilton, like I'm glad you brought up, is that there is some Wizard of Oz allusions in this movie, and opening with her, and even this is an MGM movie.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a part of the legacy of that studio at this point as well.
But anyway, it's just interesting. The only other movie I've seen her in, I think, was The Invisible Woman or one of those.
Oh, she's in one of them.
Yeah, she's in one of those Invisible Man sequels. I'm pretty sure it was Invisible Woman, but I can't remember. But anyway, so then Corey Fisher is Officer Hines. I don't remember who he is. Let me look up his picture. He is probably an Altman player of some sort. Oh, that guy. I've seen him in certain things. I don't know if he is in a lot of Altman movies or not.
Yeah, offhand.
Well, he's in MASH, it says.
Okay.
Let's see what that... Oh, yeah, he was that guy in MASH.
Oh, okay. Yeah, playing guitar.
Playing guitar, yeah. Anyway,
Stacy Keach.
Yeah, and then moving on, Stacy Keach is Abraham Wright. It's interesting. First of all, I haven't really seen Stacy Keach in very many things, but like the last few years, it's been this and The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, which he looks basically the same in.
I'm baffled by this.
Yeah.
It's like he was like really going through this phase in this several years.
Yeah.
Of, I'm going to play this kind of guy, and it's just like this old, wrinkled but obscene.
He looks like Edgar Winter or something.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand. Or like,
but I don't know what's going on with this. Of course, very famously, last several years he was in Gotti. Where he laid out the 5 boroughs.
Oh, that was
for,
him?
John
Okay,
Travolta.
I haven't seen all that movie, but yeah,
Stacey Keach, reliable character actor. Very strange in this movie. This is one of the more memorable aspects of the movie is his character in this and some of the things he says.
Yeah, and I haven't seen American History X, but and I won't quote some of the moments from that on here, but certain things he says in a scene to Edward Norton, and then Edward Norton's response to him.
Remember where you are. This is not some fucking country club where you can waltz in and out of here.
Hey, shut the fuck up! I came in here to tell you one thing. I am out. Out! And Danny is out too. And if you come near my family again, I'm gonna fucking kill you.
Well, excuse me, but fuck you, Derek. You can't come barking threats at me. Look, you can do whatever you want, but Danny is a good kid. He's not some whining pussy like you. He needs my help, and I'm gonna give it to him.
If you come near Danny again, I will feed you your fucking heart, Cameron.
I won't have to. He'll come to me. I'm more important to him now than you'll ever be. You're a fucking dead man, Vineyard.
So yeah, you heard it. Yeah. I don't have to say it. But anyway, I haven't even seen that movie, but I think about that all the time.
I hear all the time people talking about like curb stomping that happens in this movie.
I need to see that.
This movie's kind of a curb stomp in its own way, but
Yeah.
Anyways,
John Shuck is Officer Johnson. I think that's that guy. Yeah, he's in a bunch of Altman movies.
Is he the how many times I told you cat throwing guy in McCabe Ms. Miller?
Yeah, that's him.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's in
where when we saw McCabe Ms. Miller, it was almost a visceral reaction the way he picks up a cat and throws it on the ground in that movie.
I don't even know if we can find that on YouTube anywhere because it's such a specific thing. Yeah. But anyway, go try and look that up. But yeah, he's in a lot of Altman stuff. Obviously, he's most memorable to most people in MASH. I would assume his role in that. But I always think of him in McCabe and Mrs. Miller is probably the first thing I think of, or Thieves Like Us too.
Sure.
Bill Adair as a detective. I don't remember who he is. It looks like he was a baseball player, or no, coach and manager, Major League Baseball. So
he's probably some guy hanging out in Houston.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to be in the movie? He's like, okay.
Burt Remsen, who is also in a lot of Altman films. I guess the most memorable role in his films for me is in Nashville. He's the guy that is the husband to that woman who's wanting to be the singer and following her around.
Oh,
and then he's also in like Thieves Like Us. It's gonna be our 36th banker. Yeah, Thieves Like Us.
It's weird to see him in Nashville. Is the first time I've really got acquainted with him, and he's such a. I mean, that movie has so many characters, but even in that movie, he's a very background, minor character you see pop up. And then in Thieves Like Us, he is kind of more in the foreground of the movie. And
then he was in A Wedding. We also watched recently, kind of a little bit. Yeah, but he's in a lot of those. Jennifer Salt as Hope. I don't remember who she is either. Let's look at her picture. A lot of these don't have pictures on there.
Hope you're following along, by the way, and looking these picture people up. I'm trying to think.
Yes, I've seen her in something.
I think she's in Brewster McCloud.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see her pop up.
G Wood. I've heard him in something.
George Wood.
Let's see. Oh yeah.
Oh, that guy's in MASH.
Yeah, and he's in Harold Maude.
So he's in the TV show MASH.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess I don't know if he played the same character though, but yeah, he was that guy in MASH that was the other in the movie. He was that like football coach for the other team. But yeah, he's the
officer.
He's the psychiatrist or counselor or whatever in Harold Maude. Too.
Yeah, okay.
There's some other names here that aren't anybody in particular. Then Marilyn Burns. This was her film debut. She's in a lot of random stuff, I think. Let me look. Oh yeah, she was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay.
Right. She's the main kind of female lead in that. That's right.
I'm assuming that was also shot in Texas.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah.
Offhand, do you know where in Texas that was shot?
Where, Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I don't know. This must have been a big random moment for the Texas film industry, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, then obviously they have a whole film.
It should be said that the late 60s, early 70s was actually this period in which a lot more location, Round Rock, Texas.
Yeah, the La Frontera development is now located.
That some of the union rules were starting to change, and then I know that there was a little more freedom to shoot more on location in various cities.
It's kind of in central eastern Texas.
Okay, but that some of the Burt Reynolds Southern films of this period, and this would be also a Southern film in its own right, were a beneficiary of that, like White Lightning, or even the one in
how about Smokey and the Bandit?
No, well, that too. But,
then Gator.
No, the
I don't
Deliverance,
know.
the biggest one.
Right.
Deliverance
is
what I mean.
Okay.
There was a lot more location shooting during this time period. Because in part the studios were kind of literally and figuratively falling apart, and so they were trying to find new places to shoot stuff.
What's always been interesting about Deliverance to me is that it was directed by John Borman, who's English.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of like an Englishman coming and making a movie.
On the surface, it sounds like that's weird, but then you watch the movie and it has a certain this formalistic remove from everything that actually doesn't make sense. But that is
which Sam Peckinpah went to England and shot Straw Dogs, so I mean,
it's true. What year did that come out again?
71.
So it was right around this time. Yeah. Okay. And speaking of the 70s, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Hal Ashby. Where to you does Robert Altman fit into that pantheon of these filmmakers?
Well, did y'all know we like New Hollywood? Excuse me, stupid computer making noise.
New Hollywood.
Y'all know
same
we
as
like
the old
that?
Hollywood.
I don't know. I mean, how many New Hollywood movies have we actually done? Is this really our kind of first? Or what?
Well, if we want to count American Graffiti, I guess.
Oh, that would be because I'm just trying to remember what all movies that.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. We're looking here real quick. Obviously, American Graffiti.
Yeah, that's kind of it so far.
Actually,
and then we're gonna have another one coming up pretty soon as well. We always used to talk about who won the 70s, who won that period. Which, I mean, also, it's just like, well, so many people won that period. And it was just,
and I sometimes don't even like putting it that way because, like you said, it's not only that, there's all this great work being made, but all too often we live off anybody of color, anybody who's a woman. We recently saw for the first time Girlfriends. And that is just kind of really in that New Hollywood lane. Excuse me. But is so kind of, and in recent years that's kind of come up as more of a cult movie.
Another movie that we haven't seen that Barbara Loden made, Wanda, came out this 1970, the same year as this. I know a lot of people say is a big film in that sense. And then also and obviously it's John Cassavetes made these films, but Jenna Rollins as a place in his films, I think is her own sort of auteur of
and then even people of color, Charles Burnett, is like a great filmmaker of this period. He's not usually classified as New Hollywood, but he's making movies during this time period.
And there was that Ganja and Hess that was made by Bill Gunn as well, which is a horror film. But
and it should also be said, Melvin Van Peebles.
Oh, of course.
I mean, he's kind of
Watermelon Man and Sweet Sweetback.
The thing about Sweet Sweetback to me is the fact that movie got classified as a quote blaxploitation movie kind of already subjugates. Oh, this is a type of a genre movie. And again, you watch Sweet Sweetback and then you watch other quote blaxploitation movies. That is on another planet than most of those. I mean, on paper, it has some of the same themes and ideas, but much more radical. Yeah. Again, I wrote a paper back in college that was comparing that to Easy Rider and how Easy Rider got classified as this big new Hollywood movie, and then that's this blaxploitation movie, even though arguably, not really arguably, I'd say it is, Easy Rider is very much pulling from the AIP biker film tradition, and then Sweet Sweetback is out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. There's no other movie like that before that movie, and then it actually, quote, starts a tradition that is by far less radical than that is. Right. So, again, we're huge fans of New Hollywood, but I just want to take this time to acknowledge
that's a good thing to
that there are women and people of color are all too often left off these lists. Yeah. And again, there's a lot of great women and black directors, especially making movies in America during this time. Yeah. But they frankly just didn't get the shine or the attention that a lot of these others did. Yeah. Or when they did, they got categorized as something that was far less quote reputable than their white counterparts, white male counterparts were. Yeah. So I just want to get that out of the way and say that.
Good.
But Robert Altman, and speaking of race, Robert Altman he never makes like a big movie about race. But there's race in all of his movies. Yeah. Like you think about the characters in Nashville. MASH has some stuff about race in it, and also even the placement of women in his movies. He seems, much more open about trying to talk about some of the stuff going on in the kind of the death of the civil rights movement / the emergence of the Black Power movement, and also the second wave feminism that was going on at this time. Now, I'm not saying that's principally what his movies are about, but they are playing a role in this. Yeah. I think for me, what separates Altman from a great deal of these other directors this time period we love and worship, it's just his age. A little bit of an older guy by this point.
He was 45 when he made MASH.
Which is, I don't think that's, even now, I don't think that's a, quote, old age. But compared to a lot of the big new Hollywood people like Scorsese, like Spielberg, like Lucas, all of those are what they call the, quote, or Brian De Palma, the movie brats, people who watched, loved, and obsessed over movies. That's all they were going to be able to do. You look at Robert Altman, you could see him walking away from movies at a given moment and saying, well, I'm going to offload trucks now for the rest of my life. He looks like somebody who you would see hanging out by a warehouse, like on the docks of a ship offloading. He don't look like a, quote, filmmaker exactly. Right. And it's that level of authenticity and that's level of real lived-in world experience that I think really shines through in his movies.
Yeah. And to quickly get back to we were talking about who won the 70s thing, we used to say it was Francis Ford Coppola, and I think in a certain ways he's just won cinema, frankly, because he's made the two greatest films of all time with The Godfather and Godfather Part 2 and Apocalypse Now. And I know everybody loves the conversation so much. It is really good, but it's like, okay, but I don't know. There's just something about, everybody likes to be like, oh, well, actually, that's like, well, The Rain People's better than that, too. Yeah. I know that came out in like 69, but...
it is,
But...
No, anyway, but so, I think if you're looking at it objectively, Godfather was the highest grossing movie ever made. Those Godfather movies.
And Spielberg, in another way, could have won.
And I think it's like it's all these various metrics, of who, quote, won it. Because you could say, well, in the time, objectively, it was Coppola. You could say, well, who had the longest, most productive careers? And in that sense, I would say it's a race between Scorsese and Spielberg.
Yeah.
You know, those two.
Right.
The specificity sometimes of what he was going for, I would say Hal Ashby.
Yeah.
Also in his own way maybe did. You could look at certain actor-directors like Warren Beatty in terms of what he stood for at that time. Maybe he did. Or Jack Nicholson's work of the 70s. Unmatchable.
Or even John Cassavetes.
Cassavetes,
as far as,
I mean...
making a big... he is the godfather of independent film, a lot of people say in America. So
there's all these people you can give them their own... that sounds bad, but participation trophy said, this is what you offered. And frankly, that's the way I think we should look at it, is how they're all different. But if you're talking about pure productivity... Altman is unmatched by nobody comes close to the amount of movies he made here.
Yeah,
we went through this last time. I don't care. We're going to go through it again.
Yeah, if you don't like it, I don't care. Because this guy deserves respect, and if you don't respect him, then get off these airwaves.
Well, it should be said,
he
did so much TV stuff in the 50s and
Alfred
60s.
Hitchcock Presents, he directed some of them.
2 episodes, it says. Yeah. What else? Hawaiian Eye.
Bronco, Maverick, Bonanza,
Roaring 20s. I've never heard of that.
Peter Gunn, Route 66.
Some of the people, some of the time.
Combat. It's always a fun show to read out loud. Nightmare in Chicago.
Wait, it says he was on a Sissy Spacek episode of SNL. Was he like playing himself, or was he directing a segment?
He directed a segment of her and Richard Baskin. Oh, he was on. Let's see, he did a documentary about the Long Hot Summer, 65.
So he did a lot of TV stuff in the 60s.
So the films that he made in the 1970s, MASH, Brewster McCloud, both in 1970, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 1971, Images, 1972, The Long Goodbye, 1973, Thieves Like Us, 1974, California Split, 1974, Nashville, 1975, Buffalo Bill and the Indians or Sitting Bull's History Lesson, 1976, Three Women, 1977, A Wedding, 1978, Quintet and a Perfect Couple, 1979.
And it should be said, those are the only two I guess we have not seen.
Yeah, the latest ones.
Quintet and a Perfect Couple.
And I'm just kind of looking at these movies here, and I don't think there's one of these that I don't like at all.
I can speak for myself and say no.
And I think there's at least 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 that are like truly great films, like on that, and the rest are all really good, or
maybe how we should do this. How about we kind of give flash reviews of all of them real quick? We'll skip Brewster McCloud when we go through that, because that's what we're going to talk about.
Well,
now we recently,
actually, maybe this is a bad time to talk about this. Before we go into this, I was going to say, I think why he also wins the 70s. Maybe this. I know we're kind of running all over the place here, but his movies do in a way
overlapping
too.
dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think another thing about his films of why he kind of won the period is he's the most reflective of the period in his films, and the changes that he made to cinema.
I was going to say, I think
most important,
there are a lot of great filmmakers of this time period who have certain little hallmarks you see pop up in other movies.
Yeah.
In terms of the way maybe Scorsese needle drops things, or the Kubrick. And Kubrick's that's another name. We already mentioned him.
Yeah.
He's not exactly New Hollywood, because he really was active before that period, and so we don't necessarily categorize him.
Too. Yeah. Not that people weren't active after that either,
but or like the Kubrick stare. Like there's certain hallmarks of certain directors this time, but he literally, I think more than any of these directors, actually changed film style.
Yeah.
Which I know I've heard Spielberg say that he used to talk a lot with Kubrick on the phone, and would say Kubrick was disappointed towards the end of his life and said, I didn't have a film that really changed the form.
Yeah.
And that Spielberg's like, well, what about 2001? He's like, well, that's probably the closest I ever came, but I never really had something that really changed the form, which I think he's selling himself a little short by that. But I mean, Altman-esque. I mean, I feel like Altman-esque is so much a part of a lot of contemporary films nowadays that don't even really realize it in terms of the way he uses sound, the way he uses music. And even when you watch a lot of these movies, especially for the first time, I know for some people it's alienating, but for me, I'm so excited in terms of you're not sure exactly where your attention's supposed to be. I think a lot about some scenes in the California Split. In terms of overlapping dialogue and the way the camera's moving, and you're just like you're kind of overwhelmed, and I like it a lot. Where you're like, what am I supposed to be taken in, as opposed to this very linear. You look here, you look there, very kind of stale form of cinema. His is so alive at any moment. And even the movies that don't exactly work all that well, you always walk away from them and are thinking, well, that was Altman trying and doing something different
and I think
to the other movies of this time.
That's what I was going to say. I was wanting to come in this conversation and bring this up, that a lot of people look at his films and they think about the actors and the dialogue and the way, and that's all as far as being his most defining features. One of his most defining things to me is the way he moves the camera. There's it's kind of, I could point it out at some point when it's in this movie. I'm sure it is. I can't think of a specific example of where he'll zoom either out or in and move and follow people, but there's other people that were in the frame. You can still hear them talking, and like you said, it's like being in real life. It's weird to say, where you're like looking around and there's so much going on around you, and it's honestly you're kind of choosing what to focus on, and
it's
he
like
does
a choose
that.
your own adventure thing in terms of, you can watch some of these like Nashville, which I think obviously is magnum opus, and you can watch that movie 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and every time you watch it, you're picking up something new, a new piece of dialogue, a new way that this character looks at that character that's not in the foreground. It's so alive, it's so full, and that's characteristic of a great deal of many of his movies.
And like I said, he does that with the camera, and that's another, because like I said, I want to bring that up because I know a lot of people talk about his characters, his dialogue, and all that's important, but also it's the way that he decides where we need to be in that, and we can choose to not be there if we want to, but he's asking us to go.
And again, he worked with some really great
you know,
cinematographers. I think chief among them, Vilma Sigmont and Mrs. Miller.
Yeah.
But I mean, and each of them have their distinct look that maybe that cinematographer gives to it. But all of them have the Altman camera to it. You know what I mean? And so that needs to be acknowledged.
But anyway, we can. I just wanted to bring that up and kind of talk about. I think that he is most indicative of, like you said, not only the style, but also the attitudes of that time that other people were not. Because you look at a movie like Easy Rider, which we have kind of mostly, it's kind of a weird, I have mostly negative opinions about.
I've got mixed to negative.
But as a movie, I don't really know what that's supposed to be saying to me.
I don't think it knows either.
I mean, I always said the tagline is, they went looking for America, they couldn't find it anywhere. I once jokingly, in my stupider days, but I still think there's something to this, on Letterboxd, wrote the review of went looking for a plot, couldn't find it anywhere, or went looking for a point.
Doesn't have to have a plot though.
No, but what I meant actually was, I'm looking for a point, couldn't find it anywhere. I had no clue what that movie was supposed to really be about. It's so basic in a sense of wandering, uselessness of the age. And I kind of get it, but at the same time, it just doesn't mean anything, really.
Well, again, anytime Easy Rider comes up, I feel contractually obligated to also always bring up Two Lane Blacktop, which is a better movie, first of all.
Right.
And B, it's kind of basically the same plot, except swap out the motorcycles for cars. And a much more subtle, sad movie to me than
And you have
Easy
James
Rider
Taylor
is.
and Dennis Wilson,
Two musicians
who are not professional actors and yet give better performances than Peter Fonda or Dennis Hopper do. And I love Dennis Hopper.
Now Jack Nicholson, of course, is pretty great.
Right, now he's the
Rider,
best thing about that movie.
But yeah,
but yeah, I feel like a movie like MASH, which we're about to talk about right now, which we just rewatched this week, actually is really about the time it was made in, and yet is also about another time period as well.
Yeah, the novel itself and the story of the movie is about the Korean War,
right?
Which at that point was nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah,
it should be said.
Yeah, more or less it was, because the movie itself is set in 1951, I think.
Right,
so,
but of course, it's all about Vietnam. Really, I mean, the culture was soaked in Vietnam in the early 70s. So, although it's, they say something about Korea here or there, everybody watching that movie knows that this is really about Vietnam. Again, I liked it a little more than you did, but you didn't really like it the first time. What did you get out of this most recent viewing of MASH, which, it should be said, was only both of our second times watching it?
Well, when I first watched it, and I'm pretty sure it was in the summer of 2017, I believe, when I first watched it. Now, I had seen Nashville at that point. I had seen probably maybe McCabe and Mrs. Miller, but I actually hadn't seen, and maybe like Shortcuts, but I hadn't really seen as many Altman films at that point as I have now. I've seen quite a few now, but I don't know. There was just something about it that didn't click to me at all. I just didn't get it.
And I think this is fair to say even this about, even though I like it. It came off smug, and self-satisfied.
Right. It's very. It feels like, because I have trouble with Easy Rider, with this, and I also have trouble with Bonnie and Clyde, which I know you're a big fan of, and I like Bonnie and Clyde now.
That's another movie that I've liked more. I've watched it.
Yeah, and that's the same way with me too. But these movies that take joy in their
nihilism
of that time, it's very much like Godard in that sense, at least in the American kind of sense. But then you have films like The Graduate, which so effortlessly changed its own and created, and obviously the comedy drama has been around since like Frank Capra or even before that. But like The Graduate really changed the form of comedy drama in a way that would also be augmented by Woody Allen or James L. Brooks later, whatever. But there's certain films like that just so effortlessly do that. Whereas something like MASH or Bonnie and Clyde or Easy Rider take time and a joy in
pie in the face
and like poking you in the eye and kicking you in the groin and just kind of everything about it. But I think what works about MASH to me now is, well, first of all, I really love the third act. First time I saw it, where it's the football game. And I want to talk a lot about the ending here in a minute. I have some certain things I want to say about that. But I don't know, and I think also the actors I'd seen, that was one I'd seen Elliot Gould in things before, but not as much. I'd seen Donald Sutherland in quite a few things. I'd seen Tom Skerritt in like Alien, but had not seen him in Top Gun, which we just watched this a couple days ago on the Dolby.
You want to give us a quick take on that?
Not all that good, but an awesome theater experience.
I'm not a big fan of that movie, but seeing it on the Dolby screen with that sound,
right? And Tom Skerritt's been in other things too. But these certain actors that I hadn't seen in a lot of things, and now
Robert Duvall also.
And Robert Duvall, I mean, he has been a total a-hole in so many movies, but that role, and I've always remembered this about it, I think is his most. It's like that or Network probably. That's his chip, but. I don't know, that I can't really put my finger on it about, and I don't totally love MASH now. I mean, I still have problems with it, but I think there was something about it that just frankly made more sense to me. I don't know, and specifically the ending of the movie. Altman, does this quite a bit in different things, but he did it in the opening of Nashville. He did it kind of in the opening of California Split, but that movie very famously ends MASH with. The whole movie, there's been these people talking over the, what do you call it? The loudspeakers that are like, basically give orders through the camp, and it starts saying, and it's like, it says something, tonight's movie has been MASH, blah, 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 and reads off the cast list, and it's like a very shocking, and it's like the end of the movie when Donald Sutherland and Tom Skerritt get to leave and go home. They get their like leaving papers or whatever, and it reads off the whole list, and then it's like shows all the actors throughout the movie. But then it ends with, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's like the last second of it is that guy who like rides around the Jeep just shaking his head. And I'm not going to say it exactly what he said. He said GD Army, and it says that is all, and it stops, and there's no
with the gong.
Ending time with the gong, because the movie has the gong throughout, and it just stops, and I just was sitting there thinking like. I cannot believe that somebody had the balls to put that in a movie in 1970. And nobody, frankly, I haven't seen anybody do anything like that ever since then. Like, and I know that sounds like, why is that a big deal? But to just be so anti-establishment and anti-military at that time, and that movie,
does not equivocate and say, well, there's a reason we're over here, really. Right. It's like, no, this war, and again, this war in 1970 was talking about Vietnam. This war was a moral and ethical disaster.
Right.
And we are complicit in this war taking place. We're not going to apologize. We're not going to make... And so, to say that in 1970 was a huge statement. because, well, in January of 70, that would have been not long after in October, the big moratorium protests would have taken place across the country, where the country was starting to more and more stand up against it. And then you have a few weeks later, Nixon saying the great silent majority, where he finally said that. And so the culture was really at its wit's end at that kind of particular moment. And then to have this movie that just hit and was huge, groundbreaking box office success, and to end that way, showed that, wait a minute, you know what? It's actually, there was such a brief time, and again, I think this gets lost talking about New Hollywood. There was a brief moment where these anti-establishment messages were actually in vogue and commercial products.
Yeah.
That did not last all that long. It lasted for a few years. But there was a time and place where that was, to be anti-establishment was to be commercial.
Yeah.
And he hit that wave just so when that came out. So again, I'm not quite a huge fan of MASH even now, but I do like it more.
Yeah.
I do want to point out though, because we were wondering when we were watching this, what did Altman think of the TV show MASH, which we don't really have much experience watching.
Well, I will say I've seen a random amount of it growing up, but not like on TV Land. Remember when TV Land was a bigger thing? Yeah, but not really though.
But we looked it up, and some brilliant guy on Reddit found, apparently from the audio commentary for MASH, Altman's own thoughts on it. I just want to read those here real quick while we're talking about it. I don't think we'll have a chance to say this again. So, I don't like the series MASH because that series to me was the opposite for my main reason for making this film. This was to talk about a foreign war, an Asian war that was going on at the time, and to perpetuate that every Sunday night for 12 years, no matter what platitudes they say about their little messages and everything. I don't know what you think of modern TV.
I have no clue.
The basic message and image is that the brown people with narrow eyes are the enemy. And I think that series was quite a racist thing. I didn't approve of it. I didn't like it. And I thought it was the antithesis of what we were trying to do. But most people don't even know this film exists. If you poll the world, they say, oh, that was a series with Alan Albert or whatever his name was. So there's Robert Altman.
Yeah, I don't even think we need to say anything about that show because, that's more or less, I was going to say that.
And again, I'm not trying to throw stones at the show, really. I've not really watched enough of it, but I just wanted to put that out there.
It's totally pointless. Well, I said this when we were watching the movie last week, earlier this week, that there's the moments in the movie when they're like, doing the operations on some of the guys, and it's like really hard to watch, but it's very black comedy. It's like it's not really taking it as seriously. It is taking it seriously, but like not in a ham-fisted way. It's more like detached, and like the people are kind of like, oh, just doing the job and laughing and ha ha ha.
And it does, and you're like, are they being irreverent? But then you think, well, that's what the job would be. Ultimately, it's just these people are doing a job like anybody else. It just happens to be they're operating on a person who could lose their life at any moment, you know.
But in the show, I remember there being moments where it's like really serious, and it's like Alan Alda doing surgery, and it's like, we can't save him, kind of crap, and it's just like the movie never does that, and it's just really stupid, frankly. But anyway.
So anyways.
So Brewster McCloud was later that year. Skip that. McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Well, I think I've said this in the past. Warren Beatty's my single favorite actor ever, so that movie means a lot to me for that. Also, the stories of Beatty and him butting heads making the movie are hilarious to me. Also, Julie Christie, great in that movie. What are your thoughts on McCabe, Mrs. Miller?
I think it's
one of his best movies. I think.
Yes, I think it's probably maybe like I think his third best film behind Nashville and Shortcuts, because you like Three Women a little more than I did. I do like that a lot. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I don't know. McCabe, Mrs. Miller, I think.
It's obviously working in the Western tradition.
Right, it's a Western, but it's way more interested in corporatism, and which is something that most Westerns should be more interested in. But
well, it should be said, I think more modern Westerns since then have been more interested in that, but not a lot to that point.
It just looks really great, sounds really great, acted really great. I don't have an awful lot to say about
that soundtrack for that movie.
Yeah,
you know,
the Leonard Cohen soundtrack. And one thing I wanted to remark upon. There's the scene, just really kind of my favorite moments of the movie. There's that scene when McCabe Warren Beatty is talking to the Renee Abenjois character, and he's like, if a frog had wings, it wouldn't bump its eye so much.
Yeah.
You follow me? And Abendraw's like, like not understanding it, but like, okay. And then he does that to Michael Murphy.
And he has this
he's
look
like,
on his face.
What?
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and it just shows you like you can fool the hayseeds, but you can't fool the corporate students.
And also
people,
a version of that is the scene when the guy confronts him about, oh, you killed my friend or all that stuff, and seeing how Beatty like melts in that scene in terms of like, oh, I was the big rooster around here, and then someone else comes, and you just see him shrinking into his own body.
That the way that Altman frames it of that guy sitting there with the big coat and the big hat, and there's been some scenes where Beatty's been wearing the big coat, but I don't know if he's wearing the big coat in that scene or not, but the guy just looks so massive, and he's sitting there looking at him with a smile on his face, like, and the guy has total control of the scene, the frame, everything about that. Yeah, I think about that scene a lot, about that, the way that Altman chooses to frame all that and show that this McCabe guy is really small potatoes compared to all these other people. But for the first half of the movie, you feel like, oh, he's really the guy in charge. But then it's like, no, he's just like anybody. He's like any other scumbag off the street trying to make money, and take over this stuff. Yes, I think that's what I think's interesting about that movie. And it's not in a typical Western setting. It's more of like the Pacific Northwest kind of looking. I don't remember exactly where that movie's supposed to be. Let me look and see here. Go ahead and talk about Images a little bit.
Images is frankly a movie I don't remember all that much. We've seen it.
Yeah, Washington State.
Right.
Anyway, so yeah.
Images isn't a movie I really think about all that much. That is among his more forgettable movies, I think, at this time period. But it is very, it's like him making kind of a psychological horror movie.
Yeah.
So that in of itself is
it's kind of like Three Women, in a way.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a more refined version of that.
Right, yeah. One thing about Images that has stuck in my mind, I actually, and you're right, it is a little more forgettable. I actually quite like that movie. But one thing, and we just saw that pretty recently. A lot of these we've actually seen relatively recently, actually. But Images, you remember there's that scene at the beginning where, like, well, that whole movie's about a woman whose, like, psyche is so, like, cracked and who knows what's going on. But you remember there's that scene at the beginning where, like, there's the guy who was her old boyfriend, her husband who's dead, and it's like her other husband who's played by, oh God, who was it that was in that? And it's him at first, but then there's the way that, dang it, it's not showing, hang on. Oh, it's Abendrois.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that Abendrois is her husband, and like that, was it Suzanne York that's in that?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Susanna York. And that, like, he's the guy who's in the room, but then she, like, runs into the bathroom, and Altman's shooting it from the bathroom, and there's the door, and you see it's the other guy.
Right.
And it's just, I remember seeing that, and it literally scared me. It was like a shocking moment of, like, oh, wait, what? And so I think that's what I was going to say. A lot of people look at Altman's films, and they see these big, like, Nashville shortcuts, A Wedding, these hyperlinkish movies of these big cast ensemble characters. But he has these other types of movies he makes, and I think his horror or psychological films are as good as any, and I think he did really well at making those types of movies. And I don't think that Cold Day in the Park, which is 1969, it says suspense film. I think that's probably kind of part of that, too. We haven't seen that, but it's more like that. But yeah, I like Images.
I do like it. It doesn't dwell with me. Now, certain moments of it, like you just said, I forgot about that, but I do now all of a sudden remember that as, again, off-putting.
But 1973 is The Long Goodbye. Now, that is a film I actually find relatively forgettable.
I do, too, and I feel like I won't rehash what I said about this line of storytelling that I did in Inherent Vice, but it is in that, like, stony haze of, like, L.A. in the late 60s, early 70s, like, Shaggy Dog detective story. Yeah. Now, Elliot Gould is, like, such an awesome avatar for that. And I think about his performance a good amount.
I think his performance is the best of any of those types, even above, like, Jeff Bridges as the Dude, which is really close. Yeah. But I think that's the best of that type. But the movie itself's pretty forgettable. You know what's funny is that Sterling Hayden is in that movie. Yeah. I don't ever remember.
And hat,
like, but I don't normally think about him in that movie, though. You know what I mean?
I know it should be said, a lot of people, that is a big, important movie.
And it's fine. I don't have any problems with it. It's just, I saw it about a year and a half ago, something like that, maybe almost 2 years ago. and it was a totally fine movie, but it just kind of...
You said a very early Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's true too. But there's certain things in that movie, like at the end of the movie, you remember when he finally finds that guy who kind of sort of hired him at the beginning, and he's like, well, whatever, Marlo, you're a born loser. And he's like, says something like, yeah, but something my cat, I don't remember, and he just shoots him, and the guy and it's like the most unexpected thing ever, where he's like, well, whatever, you're useless, and he's like, well, I'm gonna kill you, how about that? Yeah. And then he like spits and walks away, and that's the end of the movie. That's a pretty great ending to a movie. But anyway,
Thieves Like Us is pretty good.
In relation to Bonnie and Clyde, I was going to say it reminds me a lot of Bonnie and Clyde and Paper Moon, which came out around the same time. Now, that obviously is not like a gangster or like a bank robber movie, but there's a lot of these movies that were getting made at that time that were like 1930s.
There was a lot of 30s nostalgia in the 70s. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I mean, usually you have nostalgia periods 30, 40 years removed from whenever the period was.
And even something like the Cotton Club, which is kind of about the 20s a little more, would be later on. That would be in the early 80s, I know. But that other movie. They made that like Bugsy Malone movie that was with the little kids, which is really weird. But yeah, they made a lot of those types of movies at that time. But Thieves Like Us, I think, it has that moment with Burt Reynolds of, I said earlier, this is going to be my 36th bank. We talk about a random amount, but we watched that pretty recently. But I think, and that has Keith Carradine in it as well, who's in a lot of his films.
His is the performance I think the most about probably from that movie. I think he's really good.
But yeah, it has a similar ending to Bonnie and Clyde, where all the FBI or whoever, or the cops finally show up and basically blast the house and kill him. And there's that great moment where it's kind of like the very end of Bonnie and Clyde, but where they drag him out and they throw they like lay him in the mud and the dirt, and they throw that blanket on him, and it's kind of in slow motion. And Altman doesn't use slow motion in a crazy amount, but like he uses it kind of like Peckinpah would in that moment, where it's like it shows the kind of cops' feet kind of standing around him and walking around him, and it's kind of in slow motion. It's just a very kind of different, it's a lot like Bonnie and Clyde, but it's kind of a similar, because that obviously uses slow motion in that scene. But that's a kind of sequence I think, or that moment I think about a lot in that movie as being a really memorable. And then even the very end of the movie, Thieves Like Us, where those people are all, it's like the last shot of the movie where they're all walking up the steps to go to the train, and that's also in slow motion. So I think all that's really great ending to a pretty good movie, but that whole last kind of 10 minutes I think about a lot. But anyway.
California Split, now that is among my more favorite of Altman's movies. I think one of the great duos in cinema history. I'll even go as far as to say that, with Elliot Gould and George Segal.
George Segal, of course, recently passed away. That movie's just so funny. I mean,
and again, that was another one that his movies had already been experimenting with sound by that point, but I think that was a step forward because that had some new soundtrack.
I think it was the first movie to ever use 8-track sound.
That movie was,
which you would think would be for like a sports movie or a concert movie or something, but it was randomly that movie, which I think works, obviously. But
and there's a movie that came out a few years ago called Mississippi Grind, which is quite good. I almost hate the movie because it actually had to make me admit that Ryan Reynolds could be good when in the right thing, because he actually is good in that, even though I don't like him.
That's a shame.
But I mean, that movie is good in and of itself, but it also is very, 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 very similar to California Split.
Of course, there's the scene in that where Elliot Gould and George Segal are drunkenly betting of, can you name all the 7 dwarves? And like they can't even do it, and it's like really pathetic. Also, you know what the funny thing about that is too, is that they don't go to Vegas, they go to Reno. It's like that's their big, But anyway, Nashville. We could spend the whole time talking about Nashville of 1975. What do you have to say about Nashville?
I mean, it's one of my 5 favorite movies. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's up there for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how long I want to talk about this because I could keep going on and on. I'm going to try to keep it short. There's so many movies, that was made kind of right around the bicentennial, obviously, 75, 76.
I mean, we must be doing something right to last 200 years.
Again, that person's voice may very well end this podcast.
I mean, Nashville's permanently tacked on to this podcast now. So, yeah.
That I don't, as an American, someone who loves my country, but also sees a lot of the profound problems that either this country has perpetuated or continues to do so. I've seen very few movies or works of art be both as celebratory of America and also as clear-eyed about the problems of America than that movie was at that moment. I couldn't think of a better movie to come out at that time in terms of a reflection of who America was. And not only who America was, a certain portion of America, which itself serves as a cross-section of sorts, but ultimately it's all about the South.
Yeah.
And it should be said, I was even thinking about this last night. I just last night watched this documentary called Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. And that actually kind of even made me think more about Nashville in the sense of, that it is this scene of sorts that is depicted in that movie that is about to produce the next president of the United States.
Right.
And so I just, I can't speak enough about that movie. There are just so many threads, so many things I think about, so many characters I think about. We quote from it a lot. I mean, it's just kind of, foundational at this point to me in so many ways. Again, it's one of my favorite movies, top 5. And again, if I had to recommend one Altman movie to anybody, there's some other ones I would, maybe for various reasons, but if you're only going to get one, then I'd say just watch Nashville.
And we will be doing that on here at some point.
Anything you want to say about Nashville?
Totally great. I'll just say it was a big deal for me. I went to Nashville about 6 years ago, almost now, and we actually got it. It was on a beta club. It was the National Beta Club Convention, and we went out there, and it was mostly I was actually kind of near the Grand Ole Opry for most of it, but I didn't actually go into the Opry. But that we ended up going to the Parthenon. We had that was our last day that we were in the city, and we came home later that day. And I made a big deal about going to the other side of the Parthenon that has that big field there that's at the climax end of Nashville, and it looks really different. It's still a big field and it's open there, but it almost feels like there should be something there, but that they've left it.
I'm not trying to be too hyperbolic, but it's I would imagine going to a place like that, it's almost like Gettysburg, where you're just like you feel.
No, I feel
the weight of what that movie
Nashville,
was and what that
it
especially
was
the climax of that movie.
And there were people that were there that in my group that were like, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" And I actually had only seen Nashville, all of it, pretty recently. At that point, it wasn't that it was pretty fresh on my mind. So, and it really kind of was, like you said, it was. I wouldn't even say a religious experience because that's just kind of ridiculous, but it was just truly a hallowed ground in a way. Like you said, it was very strange.
You was like, I've been where Michael Murphy's.
No, I mean Buster. I mean, we're going to talk all about Nashville one of these days. We just need to move on because we're just going to talk about it all
Buffalo
day.
Bill and the Indians, or Sitting Bull's History Lesson, which I always love. You have to say the full title. I can't even always necessarily remember what the full title is. Now, it should be said, I guess that was his first movie with Paul Newman.
Yeah, and
he did Quintet a little later.
Quintet only a few years later.
That was, there's only, what's great about his career is there's a lot of these movies that you can tell are big swings of the bat, but a lot of them are these kind of very discreet movies that happen to be in their own way monumental. Like, because when I look at this list, MASH, maybe McCabe Mrs. Miller in some ways, Nashville, all feel like movies that had a bigger budget and was like, okay, I'm really trying to say something explicit. I think Buffalo Bill and the Indians or Sitting Bull's History Lesson fits into that category, and I don't think it's naturally as quite successful as some of those other ones, but it is still a pretty good movie. And certainly him attempting to go back to the Western in the way that McCabe Mrs. Miller was, but a very different kind of Western, and trying to, I feel like in some ways, the movie's in some ways about TV, I think. In some ways, it's just like how, these things are being repackaged and reprogrammed and being put in front of audiences. And again, he directed some Western TV shows in the 60s. You probably like the movie a little bit more than I do.
Yeah, I quite liked it.
And I like it, but what's your impressions of it?
Well, I think we talked about it already in the sense of that Paul Newman being in this and The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, which would have been before this, that was made. That was made in like the 72, 73, something like that. But that movie was also made by John Huston, who I don't really think made any westerns other than that, did he? That I can think of all the time. Well, he made Treasure Sierra Madre, which isn't a western.
If you consider that a western,
exactly. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just interesting to think about that movie in the sense of myth making, and that seems like something that Newman in particular was interested in doing with the western.
And again, one thing I really respect about Newman, and another thing about Warren Beatty, is that they were not afraid to make themselves look like total buffoons.
Oh yeah,
you don't see that a lot from movie stars as much anymore, I don't think. But they were like putting themselves front and center.
Yeah.
And again, this was a time and a place in the culture, and it was starting to wane at this particular moment of we're gonna really take issue with what this form and this medium is.
Right.
And I wonder how much of it was acknowledged by audiences and how much of it just kind of went over their heads and they just watched it and it's Paul Newman in a western, I'll go see that.
Yeah. I don't really know, but I just think that's really pretty good movie that is kind of
hard to see.
Sadly,
I would imagine.
Forgotten and unseen for him.
Also, it was his follow-up to Nashville.
Yeah.
And I feel like Nashville is the bicentennial movie.
Right.
And I feel like that movie's trying to maybe also kind of be, and it's not exactly, but it is still quite good.
So what do you think about Three Women, 1977?
That's among my more favorite new movies I've seen this year. Again, his movies always have strong roles for women, but that movie literally is kind of all about women. Sissy Spacek, I think gives a really great performance. Similar to her character in Carrie, that she's kind of a wallflower and is wanting to be someone else or look like someone else and is kind of in the background of some of these scenes, it feels like. But you just constantly remember, in many ways with me thinking about Three Women, you constantly remember her eyes staring at Shelley Duvall like the whole movie.
Yeah.
And again, that's a different role for Shelley Duvall as well, that she's a little bit more domineering, a little bit more of a dominant presence compared to some of her other stuff. I think a lot of that movie. And again, it is more in that images, horror/thriller mindset.
Yeah, it's very much focused on those like paintings that those people made in that pool, and I don't really know what to think about that. It's very strange. One of the most memorable moments of the movie to me, you remember, it's like a really hard scene to watch, kind of, but it's like when that woman's giving birth towards the end of the movie, and Shelley Duvall tells Sissy Spacek, like, you need to go get help or whatever. And that she just kind of stands there and watches it, and it's like there's this like water going over the screen. You remember that? And it's just like, and her staring at that, and it's just very.
Didn't Altman say that movie came to him basically in a dream?
Yeah, it was like a dream that he was making a movie with those actresses, and that it was like about identity theft, and that's ultimately what the movie's about in a way. And it's very. Very strange. Also, the setting of the movie is like around this like basically physical therapy resort.
Yeah.
The whole thing, a very strange movie. I liked it quite a bit. I didn't like it as much as you did, but it's something that has been memorable. We've only seen it recently, but another movie we saw very recently was 1978's A Wedding, which I quite liked.
Which is much more in that ensemble kind of big canvas Altman movie. And that I guess we'll just briefly say it's about a wedding. Yeah. And it's kind of like Altman doing the Altman thing in a wedding. It's that. But that movie has kind of this weird sense of tragedy to it that you wouldn't necessarily associate with an ensemble movie like that. It's kind of this kind of well-to-do Southern family marrying into this kind of family that may or may not have mafia connections in Chicago area, I think was where that was made. I think a random amount, and we've only seen this recently, about the very end of that movie, Geraldine Chaplin, who I think is subtly among his, Say Anything, or no, not that.
Remember My Name?
Remember My Name, excuse me.
Yeah.
We should also say, Alan Rudolph is kind of a spin-off of sorts of Altman. He's kind of
who
doing
I've
his own
mostly
thing.
liked what I've seen of. I think
about that movie
My Name and
but
Choose Me. And,
Geraldine Chaplin, let's just go off on a tangent about her for a second. She has among the more particular film presences I've ever seen in this kind of moment of movies. And I think a lot about the way A Wedding ends, of her, it's like everybody's gone.
Yeah.
After all did they die, did they not die? I won't go into that in the movie. And it's like the sun's going down, and it's remember those weird statues, by the way, when people run around the house, it just fixates on the faces of statues. And her just sitting in the driveway or kind of looking out of the house and talking to one of the characters about how, for many people, the wedding is the best it'll ever be. And you kind of all of a sudden, this character that's been this annoying crone the whole time, you have this sense of realization about her. And again, this is what his movies do so well, these ensemble movies of this person's just this background player, and then all of a sudden they'll get this one moment where they come crashing to the foreground. Where you kind of get this feeling of, well, what I did was all done, and it's on to the next one. And just a sense of melancholy that ends that movie is something I think is very poignant and very resonant. Any impressions?
No, not really. I just think it lived up to what it was supposed to be, of like him doing a wedding. I mean, James Cromwell in that movie I think is really funny. That is his name, or is that his son's name?
Oliver Cromwell's, or no, is it? Who was it?
Hang on.
No, James Cromwell's the son.
Right, so who was the father? The father? John Cromwell.
John, okay.
But there's that part, at the beginning of the movie.
He died not long after that movie was made.
He kind of looks like Renee Abenjois in that picture. There's that scene at the beginning when he's having to do the wedding and he's the priest, and it gets done, and then Altman just focuses on him for a few seconds. He's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, just this like disgust at himself is just funny. Yeah, I mean, that movie's really good. Like I said, there's moments of like these statues that are like just like watching everything.
And frankly, it reminds me in some ways of the Three Women pool paintings thing. It's just like these images of horror. Just all of a sudden, and it seems much more natural in Three Women than it does in a wedding, that we all of a sudden are fixating on this, and you're like, and at first you're like, is this a ghost, or is this some like creature that's here?
And then it's like, but no, it's just, I guess what it's saying is these statues are seeing everything, but it's just like, what? Anyway, and we haven't seen a wedding or quintet, or I mean, no, we have seen a wedding. We haven't seen Quintet or A Perfect Couple yet.
And just very briefly to go over some movies beyond that, because he worked into Popeye is that kind of got this reputation, this big bomb. It's a pretty good little movie. I think him adapting something else that's that big tentpole kind of thing. I think he does a pretty good job with it.
I haven't seen that.
Secret Honor, I think about that movie quite a bit.
Yeah,
that's
good.
The one man show. Philip Baker Hall is Nixon. Really good. He kind of dragged his feet through the 80s, and now that doesn't mean it's an insult to him, but I mean, if you're that productive in the 70s, I mean, you can kind of do whatever. Fool for Love he made, which was, I really want to read the Sam Shepard play. It's an adaptation of that, and Sam Shepard's also in that. He kind of made a comeback in the early 90s with the kind of 1-2 punch of The Player and Shortcuts, both of which I quite like. I love Shortcuts, though. What are your impressions maybe of those?
The Player is fine, but I've always seen, I know that's a movie a lot of people that a lot of movies love. A movie that a lot of people love a lot. I don't have anything against it, but I've only seen it once. It's been a while, but I was just kind of like, okay, fine, whatever. But Shortcut, I look at it as like, oh, he made that so he could make Shortcuts. And Shortcuts, I think, is really great. I've sadly only seen Shortcuts once, too, but it's a movie that's lived in my mind much more than The Player has. And obviously, one of my favorite movies ever is Magnolia. But I think Shortcuts is pretty close to how great that is.
Then his last movie was Prairie Home Companion, which was in 2006.
Yeah, after Shortcuts, frankly, I haven't seen any of his movies after that, but it doesn't really seem like
I think I've seen Gosford Park years ago, but I don't really remember it all that well. I need to rewatch that.
Anyway.
So we skipped. Anything else to say about Altman before we do?
Not really. I mean, I think we've kind of went through most of it. We'll kind of talk about him throughout too.
And again, the thing about all these movies we went through, a lot of them have certain hallmarks they share, but each of them feel like their own big grand explosion of ideas, which is what you want to see with any movie and filmmaker. So what we're talking about today, Brewster McCloud. Now, this is for me, subtly, I think one of his, I wouldn't say best movies, but for me, one of my favorite movies from him, because what it means in the culture then in which it was produced. And so to answer this question, why are we doing this one instead of all these other ones? For me, this movie is like, it's almost so perfect of all the things it's about when it's about, because you normally don't get movies that are time capsules like this as distinctly as this is.
Yeah.
It's about serial killers. The Zodiac murders are happening during this time. They even bring in a detective from San Francisco to try to help solve these murders.
Yeah.
It's about in its own way assassination. But more than anything to me, when I think about what this movie's about, and again, this is so 1970s, particularly this time period, it's really about the conflation of youth and death.
Yeah.
That youth and death, both separately, are huge obsessions of the 60s, especially. And as the 60s go on, death becomes an even grander obsession as well. And when I think of Bud Cort's role in this as a young man playing this character at this moment, of course, there's a lot of analogies that can be made to the Vietnam War, and all the youth and the death that's been associated with that. It should be said that in 1965, I believe it was, Time Magazine, they always do these stupid stunts of Person of the Year, and usually they're off base or dumb anyways. And again, this is a great example of going back and, they were just as stupid back then as they were back now. That their Person of the Year in 1965, I believe it was the youth, the 25 and under. And it's very ironic that was the very exact same year that we started sending ground troops, combat troops en masse to Vietnam, was in 1965. And so when I look at Brewster McCloud in this movie as a character, all I see is a kid who wants to escape, who wants to get away. The whole movie is about him trying to build these magic wings, so to speak, so he can be this bird and he can maybe fly away to somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
It's not much of a spoiler to say he doesn't really get what he wants by the end of the movie. And that literally the environment itself in the Houston Astrodome, while this great piece of architecture, is ultimately a birdcage that is constricting him, and then he can only get so high before he comes crashing and burning to the ground.
Yeah.
Another conflation you could also make between the young and death is the shooters of this time.
Yeah.
James Earl Ray, he was slightly older, I should say, I think, with Martin Luther King Jr. But Lee Harvey Oswald, we suspect the Zodiac Killer was not all that old around this time. And the 70s was kind of the golden age of serial killers anyways.
I don't know how old Sirhan was. Hang on. Let's see. He was pretty young, I think. He would have, he's born in 1944, so he was only about 24 years old.
Yeah. So, there's this obsession in this time period with, the youth are going to lead us into the next phase of everything. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. wrote this essay at the very beginning of the 60s and 60, talking about, and he ended up working for the Kennedy campaign and Kennedy administration, JFK's, and he wrote some big essay, I can't remember, it's basically saying that the bravest, or I don't know if the brave and the bold is the word. I'm thinking of comics right now.
Yeah.
But the new frontier, it's part of this new frontier idea that these kids today, and again, John F. Kennedy, he's in his 40s by that point.
Right.
I mean, he's not like a kid exactly, but he is a younger politician. There's this sense of the 60s, especially the early 60s, that the youth are going to save everything. The youth are going to turn everything around. Robert McNamara, he was he led GM, or Ford, excuse me. And he's going to, was it GM or Ford now? I can't remember. I want to get that right. I think it was, I can't remember. I know I'm getting hung up on this detail. Ford, yeah. That all these people that are looking at the numbers and they're stirred by their own convictions. And again, this is the baby boomers or really Gray's generation are now coming into their own as a generation. And then the baby boomers are right behind them. And by the time we reach 1970, that's all revealed to be a lie. Not because the kids themselves are a fault of their own, but because the system itself is, for the most part, has either propped these kids up into thinking that or has pushed them into the jungles to die en masse. So when I think about this movie, I think it's just such a beautiful distillation of the time and place it was made. Again, not just because of the murders taking place, the serial killers, but it's this sense of youth lost and this sense of youth trying to graduate to some great beyond, but yet again being encompassed in this cacophony or in this prison that they can't quite escape out of.
Yeah, I don't have as much to say about what it's about because I think all that's true. And I've just seen the movie only once. But, yeah, I mean, I think it is all about that sense of escape. And I think it's interesting, like you said, that interaction between youth and death, and like you said,
and in its own way, that's why, as I was saying that earlier, Bud Court is such a great, this 1-2 punch of this and Harold Maude, which I think is a superior movie, but both of them are all about this like nihilistic young men who seemingly have the wind at their back, and they have all these opportunities, and that ends on a much more hopeful note than this does for his character specifically. But this sense that the road ahead is much harder than you suspect it to be, if you even get to participate in the road ahead.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things about Harold Maude, I won't spoil this really, is that it looks like it's going to a much darker place than actually where it ends up being.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a nice little counterpoint to what this is, because it's a much darker, I think, message it has it's working with. But again, you think about too, watching this right after MASH, I feel like it's saying a lot of the same things MASH was, but at home.
Yeah.
On the home front, so to speak, as opposed to MASH is in Asia, far away from what's going on here.
And he's even younger than a lot of those men are in MASH, so I think the main characters. So I think it fits more with that sense. I mean, it represents 1970, I think, more than anything possibly could. It's just throwing everything at the wall and seeing if anything at all sticks. I think a lot of it does, but I remember the movie being not frustrating, because I was never frustrated with it, but just kind of like, I don't really know what this is all supposed to be in a way.
Yeah,
but,
and I think it was Peter Avellino, who he's kind of my favorite film Twitter presence. He said something in his little blog he had written about it, which is quite good. I might throw that on here, actually, in the description. Talking about how sometimes he watches this movie and he thinks he knows exactly what it means, and then he watches it again and he's like, what is all that about again?
Yeah.
And I've not seen this movie a great many number of times, but it already, for me, has the feeling that it's going to just continue to grow and develop as the more I watch it, in the future. So that'll do it for this discussion of the talk. We're going to show you play the trailer for this, and then right after that, 1970s, Brewster McCloud.
If you think Robert Altman made a mess of the Army in MASH, wait till you see what he does to the cops in Brewster McCloud.
What do you think we are down here, stupid?
We take you now to the Houston airport, where super cop Frank Shaft has just arrived to work on the recent rash of mysterious strangulation murders.
What's that stuff in his eye?
It's bird.
But I don't believe we could determine what kind of bird it came from.
Now, there's a killer lives in this city, Johnson. We're going to get him, or we're going to go downtown and play politics.
Brewster McCloud, the movie that has all the cops asking one question. Who is the Houston Strangler? Could it be Daphne Heap, longtime Houston socialite?
That's why I bought you these uniforms! Now! What's the matter, honey? Your leg hurt?
God damn it! That's yours?
Could it be Douglas D. Green, longtime Houston narcotics agent?
Get over there! Green. Narcotics.
Or is it 99-year-old Leonard Wright?
Don't you ever lay a hand on my money. Cloud.
2312. Okay, Jonathan, I see it.
Or maybe the Houston Strangler is the lovely Suzanne.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark has taught us.
Brewster McCloud, a young boy's heroic struggle against the combined forces of gravity and the Houston police.
And here we are, we're back. A big obvious thing I forgot to even say in my introduction to this was about the police, obviously, in a fundamental way, too. And kind of making a mockery of them, which, you know, they were making a mockery of the country around this time, too, so it only fits. So, Levi, what was this rated?
R. And, of course, no accompanying rating there, or explanation there. Of course, the rating system was pretty new at this time, at least as far as the MPAA goes. But it got an R.
Really brand spanking new by 1970.
Yeah.
So, it should be said MASH was pretty clearly would have been an R, I imagine, too.
Well, that's also famously, I think, the first mainstream American movie that used the F word, MASH.
Yeah, that was a studio
I don't
movie,
remember if this uses it or not.
I can't remember.
We'll see.
But
yeah.
We're watching it off the pretty sterling, beautiful Warner Archive Blu-ray that got put out relatively recently. Hitting play in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He's already playing with
Abenjois there,
of course, playing with the MGM expectation of the
like
line.
something David Fincher would do often later on.
Yeah, because that was the first time I ever thought about somebody intentionally playing with that way. This is, of course, would have been decades before he did with Alien 3, the very first movie he did. But I remember when I first saw this, I was like, okay, what is this
still
having
like
to do
that
with
now,
it?
yeah. It's like
got all these birds.
Oh, is that how you say?
I guess so. You know, it's one of those things.
I was thought Goethe.
Goethe, that you just see it written all the time. You don't hear people say it out loud as much. At least not in our circles.
No, not around the trailer parks around here. You don't hear that. Yeah. It's also important to note that this movie was released only a year after we landed on the moon. So it's kind of important about the thought of flight and escape.
Even also, this might be a stretch, but I'm going to go with it anyways. Why not? I think there's something to be said about that. It's like this. His desire to build this is a mechanical manifestation of a very natural impulse.
Yeah.
That you shouldn't need mechanics to do. It's like kind of a timeless. Desire by man, and that way LSD also was this kind of mechanically made, distillation of a kind of a timeless idea of being free in your mind, or whatever. And it's like about these attempts to manufacture the timeless desires of humanity in some ways. Finally getting our fanfare
that will restart momentarily.
He loved in the beginning of these movies and the ends really drawing attention to obviously the form of movies, and we're not going to act like this isn't what it is,
Yeah.
Now, if I saw that all the time, that would get in other movies too. That'd get frankly annoying, but it doesn't come. It's not off-putting to me for him to do it.
Of course, like I said, Margaret Hamilton, Wicked Witch of the West.
And it's funny, just certain things she says, you just so hear the Wicked Witch of the West in what she's saying. I think it's very interesting, too, that, this whole idea of the Houston Astrodome, we don't really see any sporting events take place in them. It's these other things, And it's otherwise it's totally empty stadium.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the point of if you don't even see what it was built for exactly?
Of how sloppily it went back up, and then it's going back down real
It's like the camera operator's almost annoyed.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah. It's almost like that time Kurt Angle, he demanded that they
do it
crowd
all
not
over
chant,
again.
You suck,
Yeah.
and they just got louder and louder every time. Look that beauty up. How old? Let's see here. I'm curious how old Bud Cort would have been at this particular time. She would have been like 22 years old.
Yeah. My age. Right now.
Mm-hmm. And introducing Shelley Duvall. The lecturer in quotes.
Right.
She's a pretty bad singer, should we say, by the way.
Title song, Francis Scott Key, yeah.
I wonder if they technically had to...
They probably did, yeah.
Do that, or if they just did it just because, like, I don't know.
Oh.
You don't normally see, songs put it in the opening credits. I wonder if they did that so the movie could end the way it does.
Right, I think so. MASH kind of did that too.
Yeah. But I like Nashville does a version of this too, where it starts off with this very kind of stale white music and counterposes it to this kind of more innately energetic, alive black forms of music, So again, Kellerman, is she a human being in this movie, or is she this supernatural force? Up to you, America. Or our international audience, it should be said.
Set for in Syria, Cuba, Iran,
North Korea.
and North Korea.
Yeah, we love you too if you're still...
the citizens, not the countries, but,
Oh, we didn't say anything about Doran William Cannon.
Oh, yeah, we read... we read this whole New York Times article that was talking about... He was basically voicing his regret over this movie that they didn't do his version of it, which, I mean, this stuff happens all the time, and... It is what it is.
Does feel bad for the guy. I mean,
but he was so clearly but I'll also bird poop on Agnew's name there.
Yeah.
He was so clearly egotistical and I'm an artist. It is me who must change the world, and it's really ridiculous. But anyway, he wrote Skidoo,
which we love.
Well. Yeah. But yeah.
I'm only basing this off the movies. I'm not sure about the actual source material. Just haven't read but this is clearly going for a lot bigger of an idea than what Skidoo is. Skidoo feels just like this, studio adopted spoof of everything.
Yeah.
The culture. It's funny it says classic rock playing, and at this time that would have been classic rock.
Right.
It would have just been rock music, but
Hindsight is 2020. One.
Remember all the boneheads that you saw? Times you saw that at the beginning of 2020,
and then it's
that's
what 2020 actually was.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if it says this in the movie or not, but it said in the trailer you would have heard that he's supposed to be 99 years old.
Yeah.
So he would have been literally born in 1871, presumably, whatever. Yeah, it's something about he takes money from these sanitariums that he owns or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, $2.
Yeah.
I remember that, especially in the early goings here of these chaotic radio broadcasts that are coming in. Shut up, old man.
Yeah.
Which, again, the San Francisco Bay Area at this time is dealing with the Zodiac killer.
Yeah.
Which it should be said that, you know, the real cop that Mark Ruffalo was the inspiration from in Zodiac, he was in part, wasn't he part of the inspiration for Dirty Harry even, too, I think? Yeah.
Because it's a big moment in the movie Zodiac when, oh gosh, what's his name? Just left me. I don't want to hear about. Yeah, see, I only had to do the impression.
Yeah.
Mark Ruffalo in that movie's like, they're already making movies about it. Like, we're never gonna solve it or whatever. Basically, you know.
It just dawned on me. He reminds me of certain old men in our church we attend.
Yeah.
Not his attitude, really,
No.
but just his look.
Well, also should be said that none of them look that disgusting and like scary. But yeah,
it should be said too that seemingly McCloud, it looks like, holds him in contempt.
Yeah,
but also isn't doing anything to stand up to him either.
Right.
He's just kind of letting him do whatever.
Okay.
It's a great way to talk to your employee.
Yeah. What? Wow.
Oh, haha, sexual harassment.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow. How many lines of dialogue does Brewster even have in this movie?
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many, yeah.
It's like famously Jeremiah Johnson in that movie. Robert Redford famously only has so many lines or something. I think this is even less. Yeah. So. And I think he has even less lines in like All Is Lost. Supposedly, only has 1 or 2 lines in the movie or something. I don't know.
He's gonna kill him over that.
There it all goes. This moment has never made sense to me, where it's like him right behind it, and then, yeah, country music playing.
Just kind of free riding, you know.
Yeah. And he's just dead, like.
Yeah.
I love they gotta have the like subtitles on
I
this.
just dawned on me too that this is kind of a subtle car chase movie. Later
Yeah.
on, some stuff that was obviously Freebie and the Bean was kind of the huge one of this time, and some of the John Landis movies. A lot of car chases in the 70s.
I think it's funny they're talking so much about all this stuff on the radio. It's like,
yeah,
okay, like.
And here we are back to our bird lectures from the lecturer.
Yeah.
On the peacock, it is just that nature appears to have bestowed her treasures with the greatest profusion. Its size, imposing manner,
Here's our boy
John Shuck. Yep.
the rich crest upon its head, its matchless plumage, appearing to combine everything that can delight the eye and contend to place it in our high esteem.
His shoes are like matching the bags.
I hate to rush you, Lieutenant, but Captain Crandall is going to get really pissed off at me. I mean, I was supposed to take you right over to his office as soon as you came in. I don't know how it is in San Francisco, sir, but here in Houston, Captain Crandall is head of homicides, and he rules that department with an iron fist. I mean, what he says really goes, sir. I don't even think he likes San Francisco, sir.
Frank, tell me about the third one, Johnson. The woman was strangled.
Frank?
That's my name. Call me Frank, okay?
Yes, sir. Do you mind if I use that phone to call Captain Crandall, tell him where we are, sir?
Tell me about the third one, Johnson, okay?
Okay. Her name was Daphne Heap, sir, and she was very well.
Everything's so all these sweaters.
Yeah,
and like,
it's like you're here to help solve a murder,
right.
and you're worried about all these sweaters you got. Like, what does that mean? Anything?
You know, she used to sing the national anthem at all the ball games. Do you know the type, sir? Even had her own orchestra and everything.
The unmated song thrush. The importance of song to a bird can be partly judged by the amount of time the bird devotes to it. However, one
Titian also of this that the first two major deaths in the movie that these killers get them is that were socialites.
Yeah,
you know, so who use you know.
Should also be said the Manson murders were mostly people of privilege or people of note or renown, and if you're comparing it to that, yeah.
And also that both of them used you know, derogatory terms. So
yeah. As we said, as a Wizard of Oz reference very clearly.
Why don't you just say the next hour, like next 45 minutes to an hour? Like we're not really sure.
Yeah. But again, it's like, oh, we're gonna give you a tour, but it's like, but there's nothing of note going on in the place.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is a big football field, basically. Okay, big deal. Wearing the Where's Waldo attire here. Brewster.
This guy.
The body of the cassowary is extremely heavy, and its wings are so short that it has no power to raise itself from the ground in flight. A bony protuberance forms on the top of the head, a sort of like the ostrich, this bird is not very delicate in its taste.
All right, just please follow me. We'll be going down there right now. Oh, sir.
Yeah, you'd said this was just built. I was just going back to look. Houston Astrodome was built in '65, or kind of opened in '65. So
Okay.
Relatively new. Still.
Well, we got a couple doctors here do transplants. They'll sit around and wait till a stiff dies the right way. His heart, you know?
And I know that Houston as a city was big back then, but now it's like the third biggest city in the country in terms of population. I don't think it was quite that big in terms of back then. It's grown
is it that
significantly.
big?
I think so, yeah.
Huh. This guy.
No, actually, Chicago's third. That's fourth.
Oh, okay.
But
that's still pretty high.
Yeah. I think it's trending in the positive direction, though, so it could be sooner than later. Fifth is a little unexpected. Is Phoenix. I'm not quite expecting that. How many times are we going to talk about Haskell Weeks?
I don't know. You know why they keep talking about him? It said earlier, he's a friend of the radio station. It's like,
yeah right. He's really worried about what sweater is going to go good with the investigation today, you know.
I want to tell you something about me. I don't much care how pissed off any dip cop gets, got it? The working stiffs like us to get the job done. Now I want to go over to where that last guy lived. Abraham Wright, wasn't his name?
Yes, Frank, sir.
Okay, we're going to go around. The affection of partridges for their offspring is peculiarly interesting. They lead them out to scout for them the proper places for their food and assist them in finding it by scratching the ground with their feet. They frequently sit close together, covering the young ones with their wings, and from this protection, they are not easily roused.
Not because we just wouldn't want you to get hurt, but
we don't want the dome sued.
Yes, this was funny about the Astrodome. Was like, sounds like there was a lot more going on in there. It sounds like than than there honestly needed to be. But
yeah, as you said here, his blue eyes.
It's funny that about that, you know, that even still, even though he didn't. Even though we know that Michael Murphy doesn't have blue eyes, it still looks unnatural. Like about, you know, it just doesn't look normal.
Yeah.
Of course, but we kind of talked about this already when we talked about Off Aquatic. But one of Bugcourt's big, you know, defining features is his voice, which is very, like, I don't even know how to describe it. This is weird.
My throat is killing me. Do you have any aspirin? Thank you. Yeah. You have such a lovely smile. Oh. Wow. Well, thank you. You have a nice smile yourself. I must be a very happy person. Well, I try to be the best of things. Excuse me for a minute. Is there a manager around here?
It's funny, earlier the manager was telling him every little thing to do as an employee.
I'd like to talk to you for a minute if I could. Well, why
They took a gun over there, like.
No, don't mind me. Just stealing film.
Yeah.
Let me see your receipt.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't buy anything.
Well, would you mind showing me what's in your bag?
Oh, surely. Glue? Glue? Shampoo? I always buy 3 bottles at a time. Not that it's any cheaper, but it saves me a trip. My hair's so oily, I have to wash it at the end of the day.
In the 70s, you wash your hair every other day.
Yeah.
Not every day. It was a different time, you know?
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of people who still think that way. But. Of course, he got away with stealing that.
Yeah.
Again, that's another thing that goes with the Altman sleight of hand kind of photography and framing and blocking.
Yeah. That's a very Robert Altman shot. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Is like the way he zooms and focuses is strange.
Down to the mole on the back of his neck. Get a mole on his neck? No, that's just a figure of speech. You know, like saying something is faster than grease light. Yeah, I know. How tall was he? Oh, short, very short, like you. I'm 6'1", though, Al. You are? I'm 5'9", and you look shorter than me. So I am. Where were you when you interviewed him? Here, right here, where we are. You were up there and he was down here, is that right? I think so.
It's kind of funny, too, of someone of Altman's age. Some of the humor in his movies is sometimes fairly juvenile and just like very kind of lowbrow, which, you know.
I think I was down here, and he was there.
In the swap places.
What the hell would he be doing up here? Well, he was short, like I said, and maybe it made him feel better.
Yeah.
All right, he was up here and you were down there. Is that right? Right. And he looked to you to be about 4'9". That's right, short. Christ, Millhouse. If he was 4'9" and he was standing on 16 inches of steps, that'd make him only 3'5". That's right, he was short, like you. There could be no more shocking statement than to say the closest living relatives to men are houseflies, or that the butterfly evolved from a rhinoceros. But is there any
Again, he's obsession with birds. He feels the need to take pictures of them.
Burt Remsen here.
Yeah.
This is going to be his 36th film. I don't know. But
pederast hanging by the park.
Yeah, well, he's like a daggum, like, drug, what it says, like a what was he? Said Vice Squad or Narcotic Squad. Wow.
Stanford.
Why did he bring his family along? Like,
yeah, that's a good question.
Oh no, they just are there, and he happened to be okay. It was a different time.
I mean,
parenting, like.
Yeah, I mean.
Is as beautiful as it is rare. It soon becomes familiar with persons whom it sees frequently.
All these PC paramedics today, they can't put up with it.
Attacks them with great fury. Hey, that's a nice little camera you got there. Jap camera, ain't it? Yeah, Nikon. That's what I thought. Hey, you hear what the Jap girl said when she took off her brazier? How'd you like the Nipponese?
Wow.
What a charming man.
Yeah.
Nick? Hey, that must have set you back a pretty penny. This was a present from my grandfather. That's your grandfather, some Jew millionaire? He's a ship's carpenter, merchant.
Can this guy get more detestable?
I was going to say, is there anything else?
Everything he says, he gets worse.
Brings me back something like a lens or a tripod. Parental behavior. When an intruder disturbs or endangers the nest or young, some birds slip away quietly and unobtrusively. Some may attack the intruder. Get over there! You know what that is? Poorly rolled cigarette. It's a marijuana cigarette.
It's dope.
Yeah, that much is clear.
Yeah. Maybe both, but you know. Obviously, bird poop in this movie,
Yeah.
mark of death, as we've
Yeah.
seen already.
Like oranges in The Godfather.
Yeah.
You know, like, I swear, if I ever hear anybody else talk about that ever again,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna shrug and say, "Well,
Play it out."
Yeah.
Forgot about all this Frank
Yeah.
stuff.
Orville and Wilbur Wright.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I forgot about that. Oh, another flight connection.
Yeah.
Like,
Rest in peace, you know.
yeah.
He doesn't think it's a ride exactly.
No. Is that not the same even meaning anyway?
Yeah. You might get anybody's names right in this.
That guy. That guy we're talking about that was in the MASH TV show and the movie, I guess.
Mm-hmm. We gotta smoke it to find out.
No, I think even I could kind of figure that out, but
Should be said that Robert Altman himself was an avid marijuana consumer.
Yep.
Okay, Johnson, let's go. There's no point in them knowing we're friends.
Obviously, I feel like a pretty clear message is being made about cutting between the cops and the turtle.
Yeah.
It's being slow AF.
Where the hell have you been, Johnson? This is Captain Crandall. Frank Shaft, San Francisco. How long's he been dead? Your plane got in 3.5 hours ago. What I'd like to know is where in the hell have you been? Excuse me, Lieutenant. Permit me to introduce myself. I'm Haskell Weeks. Frank Shaft. Welcome to Houston, Lieutenant Shaft, and allow me to apologize for Captain Crandall here. He's a good police officer, but I'm afraid he has not as yet mastered the simple art of common courtesy. Have you, Captain? What the hell are you doing? Put that behind the line. Bullshit.
yeah.
I mean, it's fair.
Firm but fair.
Mhm.
Look, I'm in charge of this case, Weeks. If you want this California hotshot to work on it, he'll work my way. And of course, that's the way it's done.
It is pretty strange that like they're not bringing in federal help necessarily, but it's just like a cop from another city is just like makes you like, well, I guess the ones here are trash because they can't do
Yeah.
it on their own. which I think it works out to be that they are.
Still some of us here who don't realize. Get that turtle out of here. Is this camera? Yeah, the film's been taken out. He probably spotted the killer, followed him, and was making some pictures, you know? Fingerprints? Yeah, I think we'll be able to get some good ones from that. Okay, well, let's make sure everything's covered before we release it to his family. What about them? Huh? Who's gonna tell his wife and kids?
Wife and kids look
They
happy,
all very
by the
good,
way.
yeah.
But, you know, that was my husband, hypothetically. First of all, I'll be asking, why did I marry him? Second of all, yeah, good, why not?
Christ, why didn't you cover him up? That happened before. It was there when we found him. They all had it on. All of them? Everyone? It's the time of year. You know my car's completely ruined?
That's my thought. His thoughts exactly.
Yeah.
It is that time of year though here as well. Pollen
Yeah.
also. If you'd rather have your car caked in pollen or bird crap, what would it be?
Bird crap probably.
The pollen more immediately hurts the allergies and sinuses
Yeah.
and all that, but it's also not.
No, wait, you
outright
notice he literally had
defecation.
like a knife that he scraped that off
Yeah.
with, like.
He looks a lot. Average here looks a lot like the doctor at the end of Batman Forever.
That is who that is.
Oh, that is him,
Yeah.
isn't it? Well, look
Yeah,
at
Renee
me.
Avengelois, yeah.
Duh.
Yeah, it is him.
We do get some basic sports action
Baseball.
here. Baseball, yeah. The way that some of these spaces are shot reminds me a little bit of a Parallax View. I
Yeah.
believe some of those big
Yeah.
convention hall spaces. I think it's in that movie.
I was thinking that earlier, actually.
Bakula's not a name we really threw out there, but he's, you know, tangentially anyways, part of the new Hollywood filmmakers. Of course, All the President's Men's his biggest thing, but also Parallax View, Clute. Which Jane Fonda's really great in that movie.
You might pay for anything these days.
No. These kids today.
I mean, steal this book. Like.
Yeah. Abby Hoffman. Like Bud Court sex symbol.
Yeah. Wow.
All the girls went wild.
Hot dog. Brewster continues panting.
Mm-hmm. Ew, mustard. All that mustard.
Okay. We're gonna show it again? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Altman, I get it. Like,
we get it. She's excited. I mean, LL Bud Court. Ladies love Bud Court.
Yeah.
That's another thing. He never gives a destination.
Right.
It's all this hypothetical flying away.
It's like that scene in Being There.
We talked about that recently, yeah.
Yeah.
Shirley MacLaine in that,
Yeah.
Where she's getting off to that while
while the other person's just like totally ignoring it.
Yeah. Well, here he's getting off to pull-ups, chin-ups. And in Being There, obviously Peter Sellers getting off to TV.
Wow.
As sweaty as she looks, she should have been in Top Gun. Cause
Yeah, I know.
It was something we noticed watching that on the big screen, is how sweaty everybody looks.
Meanwhile.
In the movie.
The jackdaw is easily trained and may with little difficulty be taught to pronounce several words.
Obviously, he looks like a bird.
Yeah.
Here's this guy's family: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids, or are they all his kids, or are they just baseball players? Maybe came over to the house. I don't know.
They're probably his kids.
Yeah.
Hello. This is Frank Shack. Oh, how do you do, Lieutenant Shack? Frank. I didn't interrupt your dinner, did I? Oh, all right. Finished about an hour ago. Good. Listen, I want you to take these bird shit samples over there. Right now, sir? Frank? I'm busy right now. I need somebody I can trust.
I need someone who I can trust on the bird crap samples.
Yeah.
Should be said, President Johnson was a Texan.
Yep.
Nixon from California. Yorba Linda, California. Not necessarily where he's from, but where he lived. I wonder if, because this was in the... Johnson would have left, D.C. and moved back to Texas, and this is his long hair period. I don't know if he really would have... He grew long hair after watching this, or what, where that fell into place, but... Does she have wings? Or had wings, maybe?
All right, Brewster. Time to relax. No, we have to stay on schedule.
So again, that's another enduring question about this. Like, is she his muse? Like, what is, who is she in relation to him?
What are you always asking me about, Hope?
She's passionate. She's involved.
Involve me in what?
Sex.
Is Hope really like that?
Well, That puts me twins. Don't think they can be free. I don't even believe they can be free. Their sex is the closest thing they have to
Flying.
yes, flying.
Not they want to fly.
First, something happens to them as they grow. They turn more and more toward Earth. When they experience sex, they simply settle and procreate more of their own kind. It's William's never be tempted.
So it's almost this movie too, that he's being tempted into being this otherworldly, ethereal, heavenly being almost.
Yeah.
I'll always be here to help you, Brewster. I'll be with you until you can fly away. Rock-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. When the wind blows the cradle rock. When the bough breaks the cradle will fall.
This has always been one of those great songs to play creepy in a horror trailer.
Yeah.
Just to imply something's awry here. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even think it was in this movie, but I think this was some of the shots that was actually very similar to some shots that were in the Superman trailer. I don't think it's the same thing exactly, but
Okay.
where all it was just some music and some titles, but a shot on a plane flying through the clouds, very similar to this.
Yeah.
But again, something like that Rockabye Baby reminds me of that Dennis Quaid horror movie from a few years ago, where he's like a white guy still staying on the property of the house that got sold to these black people, and he's like terrorizing them or whatever.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Did you know, by the way, that I just only recently came across this, that Dennis Quaid is going to be starring in a Ronald Reagan biopic? I think that's supposed to come out this year.
I think you told me that. I forgot. Yeah.
It's like, what? I mean, Randy Quaid, as long as he's, like HW,
Yeah.
then we're in good shape.
I guess. I don't know. I mean,
maybe John Boyd is Oliver North. I think John Boyd actually is in the movie.
Yeah.
I love how dreamlike this all looks, and literal flight amongst the clouds.
Yeah.
This is what he aspires to do. I'm not going to quite get there though. R.I.P. that
Yeah.
bird. That's 2022. That movie's supposed to come out actually.
Okay. That cop.
Yeah. He just looks constantly miserable.
Yeah.
Like he'd be Hunter S. Thompson's like uptight older brother. He kind of looks like
Yeah.
him, bald and
I can't put into words how I personally feel about this brave officer who died so nobly. Bullshit. Speaking for myself and my entire staff. Save it, Weeks. Green was a bad cop. That camera was hot, for Christ's sake. He was a thief and May I remind you that he died in the line of duty? He was on vacation.
I also love that he they all think he stole that camera just because it.
found on him. Well, it was stolen, but not by him. But he was trying to kind of steal it from him, though.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I love this. Haskell Weeks was really trying to be like, oh, but he was a good guy, and the cop's like, no,
he sucked.
leave me alone, like.
You like Sally Draper now?
Yeah.
Turns to putting that bag over himself. At that point, it would really matter. You're going to get soaking wet anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A good way to meet somebody. Oh, I was going to steal your car, but, you know.
Yeah, it's like in Harold and Maude when she likes to steal cars and that all the time. Ruth Gordon, Maude character, and she like steals his car at one point, his hearse.
Yeah.
Plus, earlier he was riding around in that like thing with Stacy Keach's character that looked kind of like a hearse.
Yeah,
but it was like that limo. Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't get an answer if he's happy with his work.
Yeah.
He may posture so as to reveal his gaudiest nuptial plumage.
Well, this is about plumage, you know,
Yeah.
not a plumage action.
Brilliantly colored pouches, parade, dance, fly with dizzying acrobatics, sing his most fetching love song.
We get a quick temperature check on Levi here.
Well, it's in Texas, so it's been hot the whole time.
Yeah.
I remember reading that novel, Briar Patch, which we read to watch the Briar Patch TV show, which we also didn't really care all that much about either.
Yeah. The book was fine. It was good,
but and then we just never finished the show. You got even further than I did, and you quit on it, I think, too. And they canceled it, so, you know.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah,
about
but
an
anyway,
unfulfilling experience.
Well, yeah, but anyway, there was some parts in that where it was talking about it was in like August or whenever, but that it was like over 100 degrees in the day, and it was like 80 or 90 at night, and I was just like, oh my god, like no.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Haskell weeks.
It's a good little match on action that you assume all of a sudden they're going to be driving up
Right.
and then something else. Sound bridge coming too. Like, sorry, I gotta leave you hanging. Uh-oh. R.I.P.
Yeah, of course, that Roadrunner made by Plymouth, I had thought this, but I was just looking up to make sure. They licensed the Roadrunner name from, you know,
Yes, Warner
Looney
Brothers,
Tunes,
yeah.
and Warner Brothers. So Which is funny because this movie was made by MGM, but is owned now by Warner Brothers. So I guess I don't know.
Yeah, Warner Brothers
it's
owns a lot of the MGM catalog.
It's kind of a coincidence, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Then there's the famous modern lover song, Roadrunner. A lot of acids. It's pretty bad when that's the hallmark of the investigation. That's the only thing they can grasp. A bunch of bird crap everywhere.
Yeah. This Haskell Weeks guy, just like, what is his deal?
Yeah. Keeps inserting himself into this. Scatman. That's what a scatologist studies. Scatmen. Scat women. It's a equal opportunity.
Obviously, this scene is indicative of a lot of his films, is the amount of overlapping dialogue that
Which
takes
famously,
place.
I think it was when he was showing Countdown
Yeah.
to some studio executives, which I think has James Caan in it and maybe
Robert Duvall, yeah.
That the characters like talking on top of each other, and one of the executives just said, "Hold on, wait a minute," and was like real agitated, mad. So you can't do that. So you can't have characters, and he's like, "Why not?" Basically, and just like got thrown out. Basically,
you see that in stuff all the time now.
Yeah. Especially in his stuff, obviously.
He's gonna go smoke that joint in secret.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like Stanley Kubrick almost. With the beard.
Meanwhile,
this is a happening party.
A freak-in.
Yeah.
The puke-in.
Yeah.
What is that picture?
Like a baby?
Yeah.
It's like a negative of it, maybe. Her eyebrows in this.
Yeah.
Her lashes, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, but like,
It's like that's gonna defend him.
Yeah.
It's like that film.
Also, she destroyed the film.
Yeah.
Why don't you drop over here for an after-dinner drink? There's someone here who'd very much like to meet you. It's not my fault this time. The red light was on, and the door is supposed to be closed when the red light is on. That's the rule. Thanks. Well, is he coming? I'm afraid not, Senator. He's a very dedicated man. What about the ball players? Curfew, Senator. They have a very strict curfew.
Astronauts. Does he know any astronauts?
Weeks.
Aren't you gonna kiss me?
In Houston, you probably could run into astronauts fairly easily.
Yeah.
Brewster, are you a virgin?
Houston, we have a virgin, you know?
Yeah. No.
Live by myself. Yeah, he does have a lot of hallmarks of a possible serial killer, you know.
Oh, look. Take my car. I can get a ride with Vicky. She works at the
The thing is, Jeffrey Dahmer, that he, as a kid, picked up dead animals and, like, went through them and looked at them. And,
yeah. Talk about a weird guy.
Yeah. A thing like that, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Billy Joe Goodwin. That happens to be me. And I've been chasing you down for a long time. I think you've made an error. There's been a goddamn error made, all right. But you and that dinging girlfriend of yours are the one that made the error. And now I'm fixed to strump your head. And when I get through with you, I'm gonna go up to... All right, what do you have on this guy? Well, his name was Billy Joe Goodwin.
No, it never shows anything beyond the bird crap happening. Just like, it's like they just died soon after, but it never shows what happened. Was it in Manchester by the Sea where there's that moment they're trying to lift up the stretcher to go into the and it's like messing up or something?
So, yeah.
Keep meaning to see that again because it's really like that. Like I said, he's literally wearing the Where's Waldo jumpsuit, basically. Figurative jumpsuit. Uh-oh.
This guy.
Duck, sorry, buddy, it ain't happening.
Excrement that we took off Officer Green's body, while the second one here is the sample we took off the last victim, Mr. Goodwill. I think that we can definitely say that these two samples came from the same bird. You sure it was a bird? Wasn't no flying turtle, was it? Sarcasm so early in the day, Captain?
Here he is back again.
Say that it was a bird. What kind of bird? Well, we can't really say about that, but we can be sure that it was from a small bird.
It's really funny, random visual gag of that guy coming in to say something in that guy's ear, and he's tall, and he stands up, and he has to lean up and then to do it.
A lot about height jokes in this movie for some reason.
We'll be out running down a 1970 Orange Roadrunner. Orange Roadrunner, license plate number DUV222. You want to pick up on that car and anybody in it's dangerous. Who might that be? Goodwill's car. It's missing. Yeah. The killer probably has it, but he won't keep it for long. So let's get going, Haynes. Right.
Perhaps Captain Crandall is right. Perhaps you should not have been brought in on the case at all. I'd like to go on record right now. I do not admire a man who uses others as a stepping stone to gain his own ends.
He's just like, whatever. All right.
He's like, you mean nothing to me.
Goodbye.
He's really thinking, why am I here again? Like,
has somebody come in and messed up my sweaters? Like,
yeah.
What is this?
Oh, come on, Brewster, you're gonna love it.
A lot of people wearing stripes in this scene.
Yeah.
We read about this in one of them things. There's like some brief, like a little amusement park that was in the Houston area or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember where, but
Yeah, because it's not there anymore, I don't think. Oh, they caught the guy with the joint. I think. Or no, well, was that guy? I don't know. I don't think it was, actually.
Take Memorial to West Loop South. Take West Loop South to South Loop East. I'll go out 59 to Post Oak Road and I'll meet you on West Loop South. Now if you see him, don't get heroic. Just hang back and call me. You don't know what he'll do if he sees a squad car.
there's blue eyes.
Yeah.
These eyes, I mean,
yeah.
The song once told us about.
Welcome aboard, crew. My name's Diane, and I'm gonna be your guide right now. Are there any people on board from out of state, out of town, or foreigners? Yes, sir. Where are you from?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. We'll have Mississippi.
Wow.
Among forms of behavior which show great stereotypes are those that have to do with care of the body surface. To bathe in water, most species immerse the head, suddenly raise it, and then begin beating the wings.
Look up there to your right. There's our famous god, Mavumba.
Yeah, every time I think
Okay.
of all the years you spent with that monster, you start shaking. You didn't deserve that.
This cop's really going all the way with this woman here.
Yeah.
You deserve the best. Not to say that I'm the best, but
To the land of the Shirley Indian tribe, crew. See that temple they built? Well, you'll never guess what we call it, never. The Shirley Temple. And you know, we're thinking about painting that Shirley Temple black.
We need to at some point go to Houston and do the Brewster McCloud sightseeing tour.
Right.
Just like see what places we can find still. Yeah. 50 years ago, after or 50 years later.
Yeah.
The UV.
Okay. I forgot about that.
Like, she's such a fly in the ointment.
Yeah, I
in
know,
this, you
yeah.
know? Again, her motivations seemingly go beyond this planet or earthly
Yeah.
realm.
They're looking for Batman. in Dark Knight Rises or something. You're in for a show tonight, son. Like, wow.
Another movie full with dumb cops. Coming of Man Brute. They keep getting out of the car to chase them. It's like you should stay in the car.
No audible dialogue. Guess they stopped.
Almost just so he could see
Right.
that. I doubt the Houston highways are actually that sparse looking on a given day. In the midst of all this, he feels the need to do that. Frank.
Sir.
Frank Shaft. This was, I guess, been before the Shaft movies.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Were the Shaft movies based on anything, I wonder?
I don't know. I haven't seen any of the Shaft movies.
That first one was 71.
So just barely.
There was a 1970 detective novel called Shaft.
Okay. That's interesting. What's the plot there say? It looks really short.
One of the adventures of John Shaft, a private detective based in New York City.
Okay.
You want to know what the second Shaft novel's called?
What?
Shaft Among the Jews.
Okay.
Shaft's big score. Shaft has a ball. Goodbye, Mr. Shaft. Shaft's Carnival of Killers. The Last Shaft. Then Shaft's Revenge in 2016. I had no idea Shaft had a literary history.
Yeah, I guess.
Uh-oh, it's getting serious. Got the gloves. Put the seatbelt on. got our bullet ripoff here on on the scene. I meant that as the character. But.
Well, this itself is a bullet ripoff. You know.
Which, Bullet's a movie I need to rewatch. I liked the first time, but I wasn't overly taken with it. I'm not overly taken with Steve McQueen.
I haven't seen it. Seen the car chase, but
now I like the director Steve McQueen more. But
Peter Yates made that, who will go on to make The Friends of Eddie Coyle, which we really love. But, yeah.
She's gonna be a merry prankster again here.
Yeah. They could have easily gone around her, but
yeah.
I think it's time to give up.
Yeah.
So what's going on in this movie exactly at this point? I mean, I understand.
He's just they're suspected of being the ones who killed.
No, I know
the other guy.
But, yeah. No, I know that. But it's just like, okay,
yeah.
Like,
on a larger level, the question still stands.
Altman loves using that little, like, stinky ass country guitar, you know, like. Wow. I love that it set up a whole like situation of tension that it immediately got out of.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
I know this probably wasn't what happened. It almost reeked of like, oh, we want to have a collision, and then it was told like, oh, we either don't got the budget or the time to figure that out. It was like, all right, well, we'll just have them beat it.
Yeah. Wow. There's some
slow-mo shots in Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah.
Involving the great Jackie Gleason. Maybe it was Jacqueline Gleason. I don't know.
This moment, I always remembered. Like, okay. Stuff flying out.
Of course, it has to be them, you know.
Yeah. Love their take. By the way, I love it's like all this is going on, and he took the time out of the day to go do this, you know. Finally got his name right. Oh, I forgot. Yeah. statue. Like, not as weird as the statues in a wedding.
No,
but
not quite. Uh-oh. Now he's marked for death. Yeah, he at least had decency to bring the camera so he can get photographs of whatever's going on.
My legs are crushed. I'm trapped in here. I get some help.
One of his eyes is no longer blue.
Mm-hmm. These eyes.
Wow.
No bird necessary for that.
Have yet to move.
Mm-hmm.
So what was his motivation for doing that?
Just
Just like,
to say, well, I've been embarrassed by these fools, foolish children. Maybe deep down he knew that one of his eyes weren't blue anymore.
Yeah.
He couldn't live with the pain. You got a real groovy happening pad here. You know?
It's some race, like it's all fun and games, man. Fun and games.
Funny games, man. Funny games. MASH poster.
Yeah. I think it was in that Avellino write-up that he mentioned that and said something like that this is a character who he would want to be impressed with his film or something. Like,
right.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah. It's funny.
Demented soul. What a troubled young girl, you know?
Isn't this supposed to be like a fallout shelter?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like... Doesn't everybody ever go down there and check it out? Like, what's going on?
You know, by the late 60s, early 70s, the threats of nuclear war had mostly subsided, but that's still a holdover from the early 60s. This is a movie where, you know, what was once mutually assured destruction has turned into mutually assured damnation.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting I had forgotten that he does have coitus, if you will, with one character, and that his demise almost, it seems like, is because, well, like she was saying, you can't do that, the Sally Kellerman character, and it's like, well, goodbye. Like,
yeah. You're now marked with the death. If he really revealed that much, even to the other girl that he was with earlier, I believe.
Do what?
I don't think he really even told her that other girl as much as that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Where are they? Where are they? In the dome. You live in the Astrodome? You're kidding. Where? In the fallout shelter. And you've got wings that really work?
But, they built like a spare fallout shelter there in the Astrodome.
Yeah.
Just in case, you never know.
Right.
I know that the Houston Astrodome was a huge point. A lot of the fleeing refugees from Katrina ended up there. It almost seems weird to call the people in our own country refugees from that situation, but they frankly were.
You only have one friend, Brewster, me. I'm the only one that cares about you. Why do I lie? Never lie. I'm the only one who has never lied to me. It's happened, hasn't it? Not like you said it would be at all, Louise. Suzanne is nothing like you said. Brewster, do you realize what that means if they would?
Yeah.
We can fly away together. Fly away? Brewster, you could be a millionaire.
Could be. But won't be. Spoiler, won't be. Like, did know ya? Boom. I mean,
C-3PO won't see it.
Suzanne, you're talking crazy. You could get a house on a Red Oaks Boulevard. Louise, if Suzanne upsets you that much, maybe you better go.
Honestly, she feels detracted or almost jealous of him having some thing with another woman, which I think goes beyond whatever she's preparing him for, and that she herself has some feelings for him. He's got very striking eyes.
Yeah.
You know the people who died. You mean the ones that were strangled?
Strangled by bird crap.
Responsible. She's coming here, isn't she? Don't you know what she'll do?
Even his whole rationale of, I'm trying to build like a set of wings. That seems like some serial killer rationale, like that. So they go to the person's house and find he was trying to build, and it's like, what does it all mean? Like.
It'll take me a little time to get ready. So why don't you go ahead and go to the dome to get in the wings ready? And I'll meet you there. In the fallout shelter. Right? Suzanne. Huh? I love you. And Louise was wrong.
Huh?
It's now been abandoned by the mysterious bird.
What even
woman.
is that?
It's an emergency. Hello?
Bernard, it's me, Suzanne.
Suzanne, Mr. Weeks doesn't like me getting personal calls at work.
But it's an emergency.
It's an emergency.
By the way, you know that phone's soaked in water.
Yeah.
It's like whatever.
His name is Brewster. Brewster McCloud. Well, Bernard, I think he's crazy.
Well, that may be true, but you're also ratting him out, you know.
And I think he's the one who's been strangling all those people.
You mean you know who the strangler is? Young lady? This is Haskell Weed.
Well, we definitely knew already. We mentioned his name every scene.
Wow.
Just don't know. That's a Wallace 72 sticker, like ripped in half.
Yeah.
So she would have been a Wallace girl in 72. That's strange, but. Any George Wallace takes, Bill?
No. I mean, history has spoken for itself on his useless frame. I mean, of being.
Yeah. You know what's weird is it looks a random amount like Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah.
He's like, you know, if he would have been younger than him, maybe he could have played him in a movie, but he's obviously older, so. Well, it could have been, you know.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a racist asshole, you know.
Yeah. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. You see? Like, yeah.
Meanwhile, just in case you forgot.
Yeah. This is just straight up horrifying. Like.
Yeah.
Raising her bright blue feet as high as she can and thrusting out her chest.
Was that the last time we see him in the movie?
Maybe. He might be at the very, very end as far as show all the cast members again.
Oh, that's right.
I can't remember.
But it's just like, wow.
He has become a bird.
Yeah. It's like, why? You know, like, why
on
did
what grounds,
that need to happen?
Sir?
I don't know, but it's something worth remembering. Me too.
That guy.
It's not right. Yes, it is. I mean, we're not married. It's all right. All right, I'll marry you.
How romantic.
Yeah.
Just as soon as Mr. Weeks gets back.
Okay.
Courtship activities have the further function of regulating the timing of sex readiness so that the
So we do get him a little bit more here.
Well, I mean, yeah, we get more of his narration, but I was
okay,
wondering if it went back to
Yeah.
show him in an even more demented form.
He just looks like Birdman after a certain point. Or was it the unexpected virtue of ignorance?
Yeah.
The name of that.
Maybe we'd better wait until we're married this evening.
Yeah.
You're not gonna leave me like this.
Well, we better go look for Mr. Weeks. He's been gone a long time.
You know, one thing I kind of had forgotten about this movie is it doesn't have a lot of licensed music in it.
No.
As much as I feel like some of his other movies do. Well, not even lots of music. I mean, a lot of his movies kind of have diegetic music. I guess I'm thinking a lot about Nashville.
Yeah.
There was that song from earlier, but
yeah, we've all obviously been talking about how he was Haskell Weeks is a reference to Haskell Wexler, who Altman supposedly admired, but yet gave the name to this guy.
Maybe it was just like a
but
joke.
Yeah, but then they worked together on California Split. So
again, Wexler was one of the biggest cinematographers of this day. But also had several, I think, problems with certain directors. I think it was he originally was the guy shooting, I believe, The Conversation, and got replaced. I believe. Let me check on that. Yeah, it got replaced by Bill Butler in that. Also, the same happened on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where he was replaced by Bill Butler.
Yeah.
Who, it should be said, is still alive at age 100.
Wow.
That cinematographer. Conversation, Jaws, Rocky sequels, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Kyle just looked at me like, what the hell is this? Like,
and he just shook his head like, what can be said, you know?
Love this moment when he sees this and he looks like that. And it's like,
are you kidding me, dog? And she's like, are you kidding me, dog?
Love how all these songs, they sound like they're like halfway through and then they just stop.
Yeah. You know, in a kind of a big way, this is his, you know, Buzz Lightyear, like, oh, I'm a toy. Can I fly, though?
Right,
like, you know,
and
moment from
let's
Toy
just
Story.
say it's a far more violent.
Yeah. Loses more than his arm.
And he gets no redemption.
And becomes more than Mrs. Nesbitt.
Right.
You know, actually thinking about that, almost not necessarily the style of this movie, but the premise of it feels like it could be a Pixar movie.
Yeah.
Almost feels like Up or something in terms of like this image of somebody flying like a house floating by balloons.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the style wouldn't be in Pixar.
And the
political
rated R,
messages and all that. But
yeah.
But honestly, it feels like that's the only way you could do a premise like this now would be through some Pixar, like some animated thing. You couldn't do it almost in live action and have the budget that this has.
Right.
You could do it maybe more low budget, but I mean, this was a major kind of studio release. She's went on to better places and better things, wherever those are.
And also, this movie wasn't a success, so it shows that, like,
even then,
like,
that was
we're not doing that
risky
again.
Thing. Yeah. I love he's just kind of like walking slow, like gotta keep it together, you know. Like he's that big of a threat. We're gonna need all these guys with guns in here to kill him.
Don't worry. He will meet his own end. You see that picture of Altman in the wings?
Yeah.
He's like, it's like him, the way he looks with those on is like, wow. Yeah. What, is this Texas?
Maybe.
Wait, over there?
He's right there.
Yeah, I love it. It was like looking, and then it was like, oh, there he is.
Yeah.
I'm going to try not to laugh hysterically at this moment, because I remember when I first saw it, I was laughing so hard when this happens, because, like...
To the adoring crowd. Oh, wait, nobody's there.
Yeah, that's what's even more sad, is that there are few people there to even see it.
Yeah. But again, it's like, where's he going to go?
Right.
It's like he's trapped inside.
The
Such
camera,
an absurd
like,
image.
Yeah,
like,
it's something. Like Bud Cort flying around inside the Astrodome.
America.
America.
You got a brief blaze of glory.
Yeah.
Here. And again, they are coming after him because they're suspecting him of being a serial killer. But ultimately, his real act of defiance is, I'm trying to fly with my wings, and that's enough to get shot down by eventually. Here.
Well, I don't even think he gets shot down. He just goes down. Like, you see the wire on that? Yeah. I mean, you can only do so much, you know.
Man's insatiable mind, goaded on by a handicapped body, will undoubtedly invent subtleties and refinements for his present clumsy progress through the air, but he will never attain that master.
You're right. Yeah, he doesn't get shot down. He just loses control. Forgot that.
He's basically explaining, like, man isn't meant to fly.
Mm-hmm. Looks exhausting to do that.
Yeah. Distant laughing, cheering. They're like, yeah, like, yeah. Oh, people were there. Not, but
his adoring fans. You can tell they're like, stand up, audience, cheer along with them. And most of the audience are like, what the hell was any of that?
Yeah.
The grand finale.
Yeah. Yeah, I love, of course, that it's like everybody in the cast but Bud Cort goes by here because like he's laying there dead.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Now the Wizard of Oz characters in the background.
Yeah.
You see.
Okay.
Yeah, the end indeed.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Yeah, what's funny about MASH, of course, is that it didn't even have a the end at the end of that. It just ended.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, okay. but
yeah. Had a similar kind of like old starring blank blank. Now it should be said Nashville starts off doing that kind of
and it's almost like promoting its own soundtrack, which is weird. But
which at that time though, I know ancillary sales of merchandising were growing more and more even at that particular moment. So like selling the soundtrack was one of the reasons why Paramount would even do a movie like that to like
Nashville,
sell, you know,
well, the music's all great, so it's like, you know.
That's when soundtracks started to be more in vogue as a thing, something to sell. Right. Any new impressions from Brewster McCloud?
I quite like it. I mean, I actually think it's pretty different for him, too. I mean, there's things about it that are pretty definitively him, but I think also it adds things like it's kind of part of the car chase movie craze of
Freebie and the Bean,
Freebie and the Bean,
a little bit
and
before
Bullet,
that in the 60s.
And what was
the
the
John
movie?
Landis movies of the
and
late 70s,
Two-Lane
80s.
Blacktop, Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. By the way, I want to say this has been like last September. I remember specifically.
Yeah.
We saw the ending of Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry on TV. We were just watching some of it on TV. We haven't seen the whole movie. I don't want to say anything about that for people who don't know. We were watching it, and we didn't know how much longer there was in the movie, and then it happened, and it was like, oh, that's the end. And it a very definitive end, kind of like in this. But anyway. But yeah, I think it is very much an Altman movie, obviously, in a lot of ways, but there are things about it, I think, that are very different, too, that he doesn't do in other movies, that I've seen, at least.
Yeah.
Like I said, as far as the car chase stuff, the Renee Abenjois stuff is so other, like, but yeah, I mean, I really quite like it.
Pardon the pun. It felt like he really was stretching his wings, so to speak, and he was trying to really do something bold and new and different.
Yeah.
And it certainly was that, even though if it didn't quite connect with audiences.
And then he went and made McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which I feel like is a kind of one of his most prototypical essential films.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of his most essential films as well, but in kind of a different way.
Sure.
But yeah. Really pretty good. Very strange movie.
Yeah, like I said, I can't help but think of this and MASH without one another because they feel like very much companion pieces.
Yeah, there's nothing really quite like this either because even MASH, in its own way, is what it is, but also kind of feel like there were movies before MASH that were kind of like even Doctor Strangelove, a thing like that, or movies after MASH. You know,
or even like Russians Are Coming in some way.
Yeah, right. Like there are versions of that have happened, but there hasn't ever really been anything like Brewster McCloud. Again, it feels like a movie that the only type of movie like this that could be made now is like something that would be made this weird, but it would be raunchier and it would show on Comedy Central at like 2 o'clock at night. And there'd be all these stoner people that would be like, "Oh, this movie's just so great," and like I feel like it could have that. And it is a cult film in its own way now, and people know about it. But I feel like it could have that
audience
now, but it's just people don't really know about it. I guess as far as those types of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not like a laugh a minute kind of movie either.
No,
it's got a very strange sense of humor. That
also the silences were not something I quite remembered, especially in the later half of the silences in the movie. I don't quite remember that. It's only my third time seeing it, but. Yeah, like I said, I think he's made several good amount better movies, but this is probably among my favorites just because it's really daring, it's very bold, and again, it's such a time capsule of when it was made.
Yeah.
Of all the things. Again, I especially think this movie with regards to like lost youth and the death of youth of a certain time frame and time period. Again, I think that's what makes it very intriguing because I think he was really good at portraying a lot of older or middle-aged characters on film, and young people don't immediately jump to mind in terms of his subjects,
right?
But this is one I think like they were.
Yeah, because something like now Warren Beatty wasn't very old when not like
it was in his mid-30s,
but in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, but that seems like a very like aged character.
Yeah,
or a lot of characters,
especially back then in your mid-30s was older than what mid-30s.
And there were a lot of characters in Nashville that were older.
Some young characters.
Yeah, there were some younger, but.
It should be said even too as far as ingredients for future films. This damaged young person that may or may not be a killer of sorts is, of course, something that pops back up in Nashville again.
Right.
With that. But yeah, like I said, I think it really succeeds in its wackiness, in its zaniness.
Yeah.
And it does not, not everything is a one-to-one easily markable comparison point in terms of or what it quote means, but I think that's what's enriching about it is that there's so much there that you can pick and choose what to pay attention to. So I'm gonna have trouble coming up with a transition to our next movie. Do you have one for us, maybe?
Well, this movie's good, and the next movie is bad.
Yeah, that'll work.
And you know what's interesting is this movie isn't as well known. That movie is very well known. And if we are going to alienate some listeners on this next one, then maybe you don't need to be listening to this podcast.
But what's ironic is that it comes from a director that we quite love, and this will be the first chance we're going to dive into talking about him. Quentin Tarantino's 2012. Southern Western Django Unchained. You know what's strange about Django Unchained? This is probably, among modern audiences, among his more seen movies, which most of his movies have been seen by wide extents. But, he won an Academy Award for the screenplay of that movie, which is quite baffling. Christoph Waltz also won an Oscar.
He, of course, won along with Roger Avery for Pulp Fiction, so it's not like he hasn't been awarded before, at least. That's the one thing about that I can stomach. Which I can't stomach it, but...
He might have even won another time. I can't remember if Inglourious Basterds won, maybe.
Might have.
Talk about Quentin Tarantino, Levi, for us real quick.
Well, I think anybody, especially people our age, when you're first getting into movies, he's one of the first people. Especially because he's making movies that are current. He's still making movies, even though he's saying...
No, he's only one for Pulp Fiction.
Okay, that he said that his next movie is going to be his last because he has this whole ego trip he has to go through. But a film like Reservoir Dogs, which is still overall my favorite film that he's made, and it's quite close running between that and something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Inglourious Basterds. Are all really, and Pulp Fiction, all really kind of close there. Those are kind of the main four. And then stuff after that are good, but it kind of, drops down a little more after that. Jackie Brown's up there too. But, I don't know. I think that he's somebody who always deals in incredibly volatile and risky material as far as the kind of, disparate influences and aspects that his movies go into, and that he usually doesn't have trouble in making an overall transcendent product out of those things. Something like Inglourious Basterds, which I know there's a lot of people I know personally who don't like that movie because they feel that it first of all is not historically accurate. Some people felt that way too about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But what I don't think understand about it is that it in itself is positing itself as a exploitation film for Jews in its own way. That it's like, but what if we had this not only Jewish revenge, but just general American or British or the Allied revenge against Hitler and the Nazis. Now, and if people don't like that, that's just them, but that's the intent. Like I said, some people just don't understand that, and that's just what it is. I think it's kind of the same way with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in the sense of that's more complicated because it's kind of saying, but what about this great time of Hollywood history that wasn't altered by the death, these Manson murders and the death of Sharon Tate and her friends, and it's like, well... And it's good because it posits, okay, well, they didn't die. And it's like, okay, well, good. But, and you get this definitive revenge against those, the perpetrators. But at the same time, it's also celebrating a time period that was not good for many people in Hollywood, be they female or minorities or whatever. So that's a little more complicated in what it's about. But something like Django Unchained, which you've seen more times than I have, I've still only seen it the once. I just frankly didn't have any time for it all. And like I said, his other films kind of toe that line sometimes of being risky in certain ways, and they don't always come out clean. I don't think any of his movies really do. But
he embraces that about himself, though.
Yeah, I mean, and he enjoys that about himself. But pretty much everything about Django Unchained I find to be loud, gaudy, and just plain misguided, and I don't just want to use the word racist because I don't even know how to typify that movie, but not just. It's fascinating to me. Not even I'm fascinated genuinely that people see this film as an accomplishment and celebrate.
Yeah, I mean,
it.
it's complicated because I mean most of his movies have audiences that love it, and especially Tarantino's audiences. And I want to talk about the nature of Tarantino fandom a little bit next week. We'll go in more detail about that. And again, as someone who is a fan mostly, not only a fan, but quite loves almost the majority of his movies, that's a time where, again, he's playing with those volatile chemicals, as you said, and it just goes haywire. And what's very unfortunate is that it made money.
Yeah.
He won Academy Award for it. So, he's a very unhumble person as it is.
Right.
But many of the, I think, things he needs to be, called attention to and make revisions to his own vision with that movie in particular are not going to ever stick.
Right.
He is who he is. And again, for the most part, that's been a enriching thing for cinema. Some would argue otherwise. But the thing about that movie is he's always, in particular, faced a lot of criticism for his depiction of African Americans and or his use of the N-word specifically.
Yeah.
And in that movie, he went full-fledged, how far can I take this material? And he's very clearly someone who, you can just tell by the way he acts and talks, and his influence is absolutely gobsmacked by anyone thinking that he could be the least bit racist.
Yeah.
Because he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I've got all these black friends, I love all these black movies, I love all this black music. Like, what's the problem, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a good example of someone who's engaging their white privilege in the sense of not being able to see past their own idea of what's, quote, cool.
Yeah.
Let's just say Antebellum America was not, quote, cool for many people,
No.
the vast majority of people, let's say. And while he's trying to reverse it and saying, oh, this is a revenge movie, I think actually when you break down a lot of the components of the plot, which we'll be doing next week, actually it's far more regressive and reactionary than I think he even intends it to be.
Yeah.
And in doing that, he is engaging in many of the various forms of narrative racism that have long perpetrated in these style and these narratives.
Well, it's going to be interesting to rewatch the movie because it's going to be a real time me remembering what I don't like about it. Because I remember, but it's a movie I've only seen once, and I've frankly tried to just blot out of my mind as much as possible. But the one thing I remember pretty definitively, I remember, different things from that movie, but one thing I definitively remember is there's two moments I remember in particular. There's one where there's those dogs that are like mauling the black slaves, and there's the shot of the dogs with the bones in their teeth of one of the slaves that they ate and killed. So there's that moment, and it's shot very specifically. And then there's the Mandingo fighting scene, which goes beyond showing what it is for what it is, and actually is taking joy in the act very clearly.
Yeah.
So I know what he's trying to do, and he's trying to do what he did with Inglourious Basterds and what he did with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in that sense. But he is engaging in it to a point where, like you said, there's nothing cool about it. There's nothing fun about it. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong in loving Inglourious Basterds in that way, that it is in itself saying, but I still don't feel that it does that in the same way or treats the Holocaust like that does slavery.
I want to specifically we're going to talk about his career in general, but I specifically want to spend a portion of next week's episode talking about his vision of history and what his vision of history has us to tell us about him as an artist. So we'll have those conversations about maybe the possible ickiness of some ideas, even in Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah.
Movie that I myself also love and admire quite a bit. And it should be said, almost all of his movies are controversial in some sense.
Yeah.
Django's no exception. There have been plenty of people that came out
Oh
and
yeah,
said and took issue with it.
And there are a lot of people who don't like it, but frankly, it's usually people who don't like his films anyway. So
again, we are fans of him generally. Approaching a movie we do not like from him.
Yeah.
And we kind of want to do that as a challenge for ourselves, even to kind of talk about things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
About someone that generally we do like and respect quite a bit.
Plus, the movie's just too long.
Yeah.
And he makes a lot of long movies, but, you know.
I think this was brought up quite a bit. I believe that was his first movie after the passing of Sally Menke, who was his longtime editor.
Right.
You know, and I don't want to... Fred Raskin was the guy who did that. And so... You know, I mean, all those other Tarantino movies up to that point have just such a rhythm and such a narrative propulsion, and that movie just does not quite have that.
No.
So
well, and we can talk about this when we talk about movies specifically, but it has a climax in the same place twice.
Yeah,
an hour apart.
Very redundant. Yeah,
and it's just like, why?
And then we got Tarantino as an actor also in the movie. We can't
well,
forget, as an Australian,
and also that movie, I'm kind of remembering certain things about now. He's known for his over-the-top violence. I feel like that's his most clearly over-the-top violent film.
Yeah, probably so.
Because even there's moments in The Hateful Eight, which we haven't even mentioned yet, which we both quite love, and that kind of getting to that point. But that movie's a lot more conversational and insular, and it has its violence, but it's just not as...
Another thing I want to say, too, and we'll talk about this more in depth next week, is that I feel like... that, you know, if you're looking at Django versus The Hateful Eight, which I think is a interesting thing to do.
Well, they're both westerns, and they both deal with race.
Right,
so,
is that, like, I think sometimes artists that are like, especially somebody like him, it's like, oh, I'm going to make my, quote, slavery movie.
Yeah.
And there's all this pressure that movie has to be all about slavery. But you look at Hateful Eight, and it's like, it's not about slavery exactly.
No.
The plot on the surface is all about... it's like a murder mystery.
Right.
It's like an Agatha Christie set in a Western cabin, basically.
Yeah.
That's what the plot is. But under the surface, very clearly, there are a lot of racial dynamics. But the movie doesn't have to bring the burden of being the race movie.
Right.
It just is naturally born out of the characters.
Yeah.
And that has some interesting things to say about race, too, but I think it ultimately is among his more subtle films with that regard.
Right.
I don't know how subtle it is, but it's very effective, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, that's just... I always think of those two movies as examples of, actually not taking something full-on, but it actually being a better version than when you try to do the full-on thing and you're failing miserably at it. So, again, we're both fans of Tarantino, but we want to talk about some things about Tarantino that might not be so great, and we think like Django's a good place to start with that.
Hang it all there because that's where most of it is. So, even though there are a lot of things in his other movies too, but there's not a whole lot of good in that movie. So, yeah.
So, anyways, this is the end of our episode today on Brewster McCloud. We hope you enjoyed. Take care. God bless.
My first guest is the man who directed MASH. And Brewster McCloud and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and he's also the man who once said an interesting thing. He said, no one has ever made a good movie. That could be the theme of our conversation. I think maybe he's being too modest. But here's a clip from MASH, M-A-S-H, and after that we will meet Robert Altman. Take a look at this.
Captain Peterson! What are you two hoodlums doing in this hospital?
Ma'am, we are surgeons and we are here to operate. We're just waiting for a starting time, that's all.
You can't even go near a patient until Colonel Merrill says it's okay, and he's still out to lunch.
Look, Mother, I want to go to work in 1 hour. We are the pros from Dover, and we figure to crack this kid's chest and get out to the golf course before it gets dark. So you go find the gas passer, and you have him pre-medicate this patient. Then bring me the latest pictures on him. The ones we saw must be 48 hours old by now. Then call the kitchen and have them rustle us up some lunch. Ham and eggs will be all right. Steak would be even better. And give me at least one nurse who knows how to work in close without getting her tits in my way.
How do you want your steak cooked?
We welcome the director of that film, Robert Altman.
Does it seem odd to see a little bit of the movie after this long, like that? Does it?
Yeah, the last time I saw it was here, I think.
We showed some of that before.
No.
Maybe even that same part. What does it feel like when you see a film a year later? Do you have a critical eye for things you might have done over?
Well, it's embarrassing, but I like it.
You like it?
Yeah, it's surprising.
You know that when Orson Welles was here, he honestly backstage would not look at his clips when they were on the screen. He just, embarrassing for him.
He's more sensible than I am because I still like what I do.
Say, who is that actor who was so brilliant in McCabe and Mrs. Miller? And he was the big tall man at the end, the marksman.
Oh, Hugh Millay.
He's
never acted before. That was his first.
That's funny because I thought his name sounded familiar. I watched The Crawl and then I forgot the name. He's never acted.
His grandfather was a painter.
Yeah.
But I just used him in a very much larger role in the film I just finished.
Now, how can you take a guy who hasn't acted and know that it's not going to be a disaster?
Well, he's not expensive, so the replacement is easy, and I just felt that well, basically Hugh is a sort of a con man anyway, so he's been acting all his life, and it was very easy. He did exactly the same thing that he does.
Yeah, he was so good at it. What do you mean by this mysterious quote that nobody... well, it was in an article, wasn't it? You said about nobody has ever made a good movie.
No, what I said was that I feel that the medium of film has not yet really been explored. In other words, I think that when we started a film, we took it from theater, literature, and we were an extension of another art form. And it's still that way. It's getting away from it. And I think that eventually somebody will make a film that is purely a film, and the audience can respond to as such. And I don't think it's been done.
How could it not have anything to do with anything else? I mean, it has to have dialogue, doesn't it? It has to have...
Well, no. I think it's...
Well, they didn't for a long time, did they? Come to think of it.
I think it's like a painting, an experience. It's got... The only limitations are the linear ones. It has length. It has its beginning and an end. It takes a certain amount of time. But I think that ideally the audience can look at a film, emotionally get the whole thing, and not necessarily be able to explain it to somebody else. They say, hey, how'd you like the picture? I liked it.
Should they be able to tell what it means?
Yeah, to them. I think they should, to themselves, they should feel and know what it means. And it happens in sections of films that you see today. You get an impression. Yeah. And you know what it means, but you can't articulate it.
You must have... You must make scriptwriters furious because you will let the actors improvise things, make up things, and you'll shoot even rehearsals sometimes, don't you? Or is that true that you shot some rehearsals for MASH?
Well, MASH we had to, but I mean, the whole picture was getting out of hand.
Yeah.
But the film I just finished was my own screenplay, and I must say to any writers out there that I treated mine worse than I did any of yours.
Treated yours what?
My own screenplay.
Your own script, I see.
But it's not, I don't consider that we're misusing the screenplay. We use it as it's a guide, and I'm trying to just bring the impression, the behavior that the author intended, or that we all intended, to the best way possible.
Do you have any idea why we're so different? I'm thinking of one certain thing I know about you, and that is, to look at you, you look like maybe a quiet conservative businessman, but you can get drunk and stay out all night and a couple of nights and then go right to work, and I've heard this anyway, I don't know if it's true. If I did that, I would be rolled in flat on my face to work, and I would have to have a transfusion and sent home.
Well,
or have I misrepresented you?
No, I sometimes don't sleep as much as I should.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid of the dark, and I'm worried that I can't really do what I have to do the next day. So I stay awake and ignore it.
Is that what it is? You'll stay up because you don't want to have the horribles that come with going to sleep?
I think so.
Yeah. Gee.
I really look at a film and I think there's no way to do this tomorrow, and then after I see a film, I say, how did they do that? I don't know how it gets done.
Yeah. Do you have any heroes among the filmmakers?
Oh, a lot. I think primarily the early filmmakers in Hollywood, who, I'm always asked, being a late arrival to critics and things. I'm always asked, who are your favorite, who influenced you, and what directors influenced you? And the truth of it is, I probably don't know their names, because I was very influenced when I was very young by films, but I didn't know there was a director.
It's strange to think there was an age when people didn't go to movies because of a certain director, but because of who's in the movies. And, now directors are stars in a very odd way, which may not be good. Maybe we can talk about that some more. Let's take a little march through time with Bird's Eye Frozen Orange Plus, and we'll be back.
Thank you very much. So nice. Goodbye.